In the suffocating darkness, light seemed to vanish completely, swallowed by the void. All that remained was the sound of ragged breathing and a twisted, distorted smile. The battlefield was drenched in blood, and crimson flashes rained down relentlessly, leaving no room to retreat. One by one, people fell, and yet amid the carnage flickers of fragile hope still lingered. "We made it this far," someone whispered. Even in the face of unrelenting fury, their willpower held firm. If we can defeat it, then maybe." But everything happened too fast. A beam of light tore through Gray Lee's chest. The pain was so sudden it froze him in place. His torso pierced, his eyes grew vacant. His dreams collapsed. As his knees buckled, his body crumpled to the ground, drained of strength. Only regret remained. So, this is it. Blood pooled around him, mingling with the bodies of the fallen. Gray began to accept it. This was a fatal blow. Looking at the ruins, at his fallen comrades, a wave of shame engulfed him. Is this how I die? Powerless, unable to do a single thing. His eyes, burning with hatred, locked onto the creature hovering in midair. It had come from nowhere, an unknown calamity that wiped out the entire continent. That thing is humanity's enemy. The Purger. It continued its rampage. Gray's gaze shifted to those still fighting, a shield bearer standing tall and unflinching. I can only hope they'll carry on for us. This was the elite group assembled to protect humanity. Brian Miller, the world's shield, a man who had survived the crash of a massive meteor. Bella Albright, the emerald-haired archmage, a great sage whose power rivaled an entire army. Jacob Bloomfield, clad in green armor, wielding a bow with unmatched accuracy, a sniper who once downed a high-tier dragon with a single arrow. Amy White, the golden-eyed swordswoman, fearless in the face of death, the strongest swordmaster ever known. Watching them fight, Gray felt small. And us? We're just the support unit. He had known for some time now that everything felt like being used and discarded. The truth was crueler than he expected. They were pawns, expendable sacrifices. As Gray watched the others' combat techniques fluid, powerful, he couldn't help but admire them. These people really are on another level. He knew the graduates of the World Union Academy were incredibly capable, but seeing them in action revealed the vast, almost hopeless gap between them. I didn't expect it to be this big. The Purger was now suppressed by a barrage of magic spheres. Gray trembled where he lay, consumed by self-pity. Does the support team even matter? Would it make a difference if we were never here at all? Amy kept pressing forward, her sword slashes bursting with power. Gray's bitterness boiled over. Humiliation swelled in his chest. We trained just as hard, but Amy moved faster, forcing the Purger on the defensive. Finally, one of her strikes drew blood. But the creature didn't flinch, it laughed. Oh? You managed to hurt me. Now, its body radiated a terrifying energy, bright crimson, far more intense than before. This feels completely different, it's getting stronger. Not bad, the creature sneered. It's about time. The Purger unleashed a swirling spiral of power that, in an instant, transformed into massive blades shooting forward. The remaining fighters were cut down in a single strike, their bodies split apart without warning. It was merciless. The only one left standing was a despicable man. Gray's pupils shrank. He was stunned. They're all dead? The Purger stood unbothered. So now you're fighting seriously? Gray couldn't believe it. He wiped them all out in one move, and he wasn't even trying before. Slowly, Gray closed his eyes. No memory swirled in the chaos of his mind. He accepted the brutal truth. There's no way to win this. His body lay motionless. Then suddenly his eyes flew open. Wait, what? He gasped. How long has it been since my heart was pierced? He stared at his reflection in the blood below him, puzzled. Why am I still alive? The sound of blood dripping echoed in the darkness. A voice called out, "I've found you." Gray felt like he was being pulled into another dimension. Before him appeared a glowing magical light, slowly unfolding into a black void that beckoned him. Come, it whispered, you who possess great power. He stood frozen, the sensation surreal. A world opened up before him, vast, like a great city. He was somehow standing, and his wounds were gone. Where am I? Is this the afterlife? But something felt off. This place was deserted, desolate. A chill ran down his spine. Someone was watching him. Gray turned around and there stood a man in a dark cloak, mysterious and imposing. Who are you? Gray demanded. I am Kronos, the figure replied. His face remained hidden beneath his hood, but the weight of his presence was overwhelming. Cronus began to speak in a calm, commanding tone. You are not dead. Your wounds have already been healed. A wave of golden light surged across the ancient magical space. Gray stared in shock. On a screen before him, he saw the image of his own broken body still lying where it had fallen. His voice trembled. You healed me. Kronos shook his head. No, it wasn't me, it was your own power. Gray looked down and touched his chest. My power. Even Kronos couldn't fully explain. I don't understand it either. Not even I can fully analyze your abilities. Despite the uncertainty, he remained confident. But one thing I know, your strength surpasses even the Purger's if you can learn to control it. Gray was still skeptical. You mean I could win this battle? Kronos' eyes glinted beneath the hood. I don't know. Nor do I expect much. But I believe the Purger must be destroyed. And that's why before he could finish, he drove his hand forward, piercing Gray's chest just like before. But this time, his voice came gently. Now go. A protective magic circle bloomed over Gray's heart. As it pulsed with energy, his body began to fade, pulled back into the flow of time. Kronos' voice echoed in the distance, I'll lend you my strength. Everything happened like a dream. Gray awoke in his broken body, still lying on the blood-soaked ground. He gripped his sword, slamming it into the earth for support. Gritting his teeth, he forced himself to stand. The blade in his hand began to transform, its edge darkened. What is this? It was no longer an ordinary weapon, it had become a dark blade. Kronos' voice whispered in his mind. Now it is yours. My power is not something mortal eyes can see. Gray Lee was ready to fight. The noise of his movement drew the Purger's attention. As it turned, Gray was already upon him, sword swinging with deadly force. His aura surged menacing and unwavering. The Purger sensed it immediately. What is this, such incredible power? Panic flickered in its eyes. It stepped back, cautious now. He actually managed to injure me like a lightning bolt. Gray's energy surged again. He launched forward, mind sharp, fully focused on finding his enemy's weakness. My power is greater than yours, but the Purger didn't let him finish. In a flash it counterattacked. Don't underestimate me. Gray froze. In that instant he felt his body split apart. It was too fast to react. He looked down, wide-eyed, as his form was ripped in two. Blood sprayed violently. The Purger loomed above him, arrogance radiating from every motion. Not bad, it smirked. Then, turning its back without a hint of caution, it added coldly, You actually made me use my full strength. Suddenly, a pair of glowing red eyes bore into him from behind, as if ready to incinerate everything in their path. The Inquisitor's body was crushed by an unseen force, pinned down by sheer pressure. Before him stood a figure cloaked in dark magic, unwavering and imposing, gripping a shadow-black sword. It was Gray, hovering in midair, very much alive. The black mist no longer clung just to the sword, it had fused with his entire body. Panic began to creep into the Inquisitor's expression. What the hell, he muttered, hastily throwing up a magical shield. Are you really human? Half of Gray Lee's face had twisted into something almost unrecognizable. The black sword he held had grown massive, and with one brutal swing he brought it down on his enemy. The overwhelming force shattered the shield instantly, and sliced the Inquisitor in two. The impact tore a deep scar across the earth beneath them. Even then, the Inquisitor continued to mutter his foolish question, Are you truly human? Gray's voice trembled with fury as he stood face to face with a cold-blooded murderer. That's the question I should be asking you. Suddenly, a maniacal laugh pierced the air. Gray braced himself, stepping back. Despite the deep gash carved into him, the Inquisitor was still alive. You're still breathing? I have to admit, your strength is no joke, he growled between labored breaths. Then, leaning in so close their faces nearly touched, he sneered, I'll crush you over and over again until you finally die. Gray had no intention of arguing with a madman. Without a word he swung his sword with full force, slashing into the Inquisitor's body. The blow was devastating. Thick yellow fluid poured from the wound as the man howled in pain, hurling curses. You damn monster. But then, the Inquisitor stopped. Pressing his hands together, he began chanting. Strange lights pulsed from his body, his wings shifting into a prismatic glow. Between his palms, a magical circle materialized. He was channeling some deep inner power, something far greater than before. Time itself seemed to warp. Darkness fell like a curtain covering the sky. "Time's up," he murmured, eyes fixed on the rising moon. Gray looked up with a puzzled expression. "What the? It just turned to night." Still, a sharp grin spread across his face. He wasn't rattled. In the blink of an eye, he appeared behind the Inquisitor. "So what?" he whispered coldly, then struck toward the man's neck. But this time, Gray's blade clanged against a hardened barrier, a new layer of defense encased the Inquisitor's body. The man turned, his tone dripping with arrogance. "Pointless. In this dreamscape nothing can harm me. Don't waste your energy. Just gaze upon the stars one last time." Gray froze, startled. From deep within the man's glowing eyes, Gray could see it. A light falling from the heavens, growing rapidly in size and speed. It was no ordinary light. It was massive and blinding, like a celestial inferno hurtling straight toward him. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" The Inquisitor's voice echoed eerily. The blazing star revealed to be a giant fireball slammed into the ground where Gray stood, triggering a massive explosion that obliterated everything nearby. The land trembled. A deep crater remained. No trace of Gray. Hovering above the wreckage, the Inquisitor smirked triumphantly. "There's no coming back when you've been reduced to ash." But then above the crater a magic gate began to materialize. Confusion flickered across the Inquisitor's face. "What is this?" As the shape grew clearer, it resembled an ancient timepiece suspended in the air. His eyes widened in disbelief. "No, it can't be." Then came the voice, deep and calm, echoing with power. "You've gathered an extraordinary amount of power. That should be enough to send you back." The Inquisitor's eyes darted wildly. "No, Kronos," he shouted, panic rising in his voice. Unbothered, Kronos continued, his voice distant yet resolute. "Can you hear me, bearer of great power? Use all of mine. I will return you to the past." The Inquisitor screamed, driven to the edge. "Kronos. You bastard." But Kronos paid him no mind. "This is all I can do for you." The timepiece spun, its hands ticking backward, unraveling the present. As time rewound, Kronos' voice faded into a whisper. "I entrust the fate of this world to you." And just like that, it became clear this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far greater for Gray. Gray Lee slowly regained consciousness, finding himself lying on a bed of soft green grass. The sky above was clear and calm, and the world around him felt peaceful, almost too peaceful. As he sat up, confusion washed over him. Where is this place? The scenery had a strange healing quality to it, vibrant with life and color. When he looked into the distance, his eyes widened. Forests, cottages, winding paths. Was that Renato village? His hometown? A wave of nostalgia hit him. But that's impossible. Renato had been wiped off the map 15 years ago. It was like stepping into a dream, something too beautiful, too familiar to be real. Then, as if struck by lightning, Kronos' last words echoed in his mind. Could that have truly happened? Could time really have turned back? A sharp pain shot through his wrist, snapping him out of his thoughts. Gray looked down at the injury still fresh. He muttered to himself, "This must be the time when Belder and the others used to bully me." A trembling ran through his body. "I can't let myself get beaten down like before." In his past life, Gray had been too weak to fight back. They were too strong. I didn't stand a chance. Even now, fear lingered in his heart. The idea of defeating the Purifier felt like pure fantasy, too distant, too impossible. For now, all he could think of was surviving, not heroism. Brushing the dirt off, he walked slowly into the forest, whispering to himself, "Once I'm stronger, maybe then I'll deal with them. I just don't want to get hurt again." But fate wasn't about to wait. Not far in, he stopped in his tracks. There they were. Belder and his gang stood in his path, smug grins plastered across their faces. "There you are," Belder sneered. "I've been looking for you all morning. What a pain." Gray sighed, too weary to argue. One of the boys tossed a practice sword at his feet. "Pick it up," he ordered. Gray remained silent. He had no intention of playing their game. The others grew agitated. "Don't play dumb. Simon, let's see if you've got anything." Trying to dodge the situation, Gray replied, "A sparring match. Sorry, my injury hasn't healed yet. Thanks for the offer, but I'll have to pass until I'm better." Belder and his gang weren't having it. Their disdain was obvious. Belder forced a smile, clearly mocking him. "Don't worry, the blade's dull. You'll be fine." Gray wasn't fooled. Dull or not, he said calmly, it's still a lump of iron. If it hits someone in the wrong spot, shut up, Belder snapped, slamming his sword into the ground. He'd had enough of Gray's mouth. His voice dropped, menacing and sharp. You think you have a choice here? Don't like swords? He lunged forward, fists clenched. Then fight me barehanded. Gray was stunned. He wants me to fight without a weapon. How is that even fair? As panic started to rise, pieces of a long-forgotten memory came back. A former military medic had once told him the reason his swordsmanship never improved was because of an untreated injury he'd suffered as a child. Maybe this is the moment where it all began, my life as a failure. But this time, something inside him snapped. I'm not going to live like that again. I won't waste this second chance. Almost without thinking, Gray sidestepped Belder's strike, the very same one that had once broken him. Gray Lee was just as surprised by what he had done. Confused, he muttered to himself, Belder's attack. But before he could gather his thoughts, Belder launched his next strike, and once again, Gray dodged it. Is he always this slow? He wondered. Belder kept swinging, trying desperately to land a blow. But Gray evaded every attack. That's when the realization hit him, not something external, not a trick. No, it's me. He had become faster. Frustrated, Belder shouted, You bastard, why can't I hit you? Just as the sword was about to slash his face, Gray kept his eyes locked on Belder's movements, effortlessly slipping past each swing. He was reading his opponent with newfound clarity. It wasn't just luck, he truly understood his own body now. Belder's friends stood in shock. One of them, the bowl-cut guy, couldn't believe it. The way he moves, it's like he's a completely different person. Gray quickly picked up a sword lying nearby. I may never recover the body once had, he thought, but I still carry the memory of every battle I've fought. This time he gripped the sword tightly, determined to fight back. Belder came crashing down from above, aiming to end the fight. Take this. But Gray countered. The blow was powerful enough to send Belder stumbling backward. Gray hesitated, not out of fear, but concern for his opponent. Seriously, that was enough to knock him down. Can I even call this a real fight? After a moment of thought, Gray decided to hold nothing back. No. He doesn't deserve mercy. These bastards tormented me because I couldn't fight back. Now, with burning resolve in his eyes, Gray was ready to rewrite the humiliation of his past. He struck clean and precise, sending Belder's sword flying. Panic crept into Belder's face. Damn it, Gray had never seen this happen before. He dropped his sword this easily. He's even more pathetic than I remembered. With his opponent now unarmed, Gray moved in, speaking coldly. Maybe no one ever taught you how to defend against a blade. He stomped the ground hard, making Belder flinch, then smirked. After all, you were the one who taught me. Gray raised the sword high, his eyes gleaming with vengeance. That as long as the blade is dull, it's totally fine to hit people with it. The blade sliced across Belder's shoulder. Blood spurted out, and panic took over his face. Warm droplets splattered onto his cheeks, grounding him in pain and reality. Belder dropped to his knees, clutching his shoulder and crying out in agony. This wasn't what Gray had planned. It was getting out of hand. He froze. Wait, wasn't this sword supposed to be dull? He muttered, raising it to inspect. Sure enough, the edge was chipped and blunt. Gray was confused. It really is dull. If this had been a sharp blade, he might have died. But the moment of hesitation quickly passed. His eyes turned cold. Without warning, Gray slammed the flat of the sword across Belder's face. The blow landed with a sickening crack. Blood burst from Belder's nose, and a couple of teeth went flying. He hit the ground hard, skidding backward. Gray felt no sympathy. He just thought to himself, I'll stick with this dull sword. Gray walked toward him, calm and commanding. Belder was already crawling backward in fear. With a sneer, Gray asked mockingly, What's the matter? You were yelling so much earlier. Belder trembled, on the verge of tears. But Gray wasn't done. You're the one who said dull swords were safe, remember? His face relaxed into a smile, but his eyes stayed sharp with rage. It was you, wasn't it? He said coldly. Belder was too terrified to speak. Just when it seemed like he might have learned his lesson, Belder suddenly shouted, What are you idiots waiting for? Get him. His goons hesitated. The chubby one looked uncertain after witnessing the brutal fight, but the bowl-cut guy remained aggressive and impulsive. Let's go. We'll grab him from behind. They rushed at Gray from all directions, hoping to overwhelm him. But he didn't flinch. Standing still and cold as ice, he scoffed, "What's this? Round 2? They attacked with everything they had. Gray didn't move a muscle until suddenly, the air was filled with screams and groans of pain. One by one, they collapsed. Bloodied, bruised and broken, they knelt before him, their faces swollen and battered. Looking at them, Gray was reminded of his own painful past, how afraid he used to be of this very group. His voice turned stern. "You guys are from the Saria Sword Dojo, right?" Belder looked away but gave a small nod. The chubby one confessed. "We thought we were strong enough, so we stopped going." Gray couldn't hide his disappointment. "Strong enough, huh?" He sighed, disillusioned. "Maybe I expected too much from that place. Still, it served its purpose." Resting the sword casually on his shoulder, he issued his demand. "Introduce me to that dojo. They only accept students through referral, right?" Humiliated, Belder flinched. Could you ask someone else? If my master hears that I lost, I can't even imagine what he'd say." Gray swung his sword through the air in a threatening arc. "Well then, why don't we finish what we started?" he said coldly. Belder's face darkened with fear. As if possessed, he abandoned his teammates and bolted, shouting over his shoulder, "I'll introduce you. The dojo's this way." His comrades were left in shock. "Wait, what? Belder, don't leave us behind." A while later, Belder and the others led Gray Lee to a small town. Along the way, Belder glanced over with curiosity. "So why are you trying to get into the dojo anyway?" Gray replied flatly, as if it were obvious, "That place offers recommendations for the academy. Isn't that right?" Belder, who'd been skipping for a while, only vaguely remembered. "Yeah, I've heard something like that." Gray confirmed, "That's what I'm after." The long-haired guy cut in, "Honestly, you're strong enough already. You probably don't even need the academy." But Gray didn't allow himself to slack off just because of compliments. "If I really was strong enough, wouldn't that be nice?" His thoughts drifted to the fight against the Purger, the one who had easily overwhelmed the world's strongest lineup. Even when Gray used that power, he couldn't land a real hit, especially when the Purger was fighting seriously. The memory of that overwhelming strength lit a fire inside him. How strong do I have to get to defeat that guy? Still, it wasn't impossible. Lost in thought, Gray barely noticed when Belder pointed ahead. "We're here." He hadn't come to the dojo for fame or status, his only goal was to grow stronger. For even a split second during that battle, he had managed to control the dark power. He recalled training with the Sword Saint. In that moment, all he focused on was the pure swordsmanship the Sword Saint had taught him. Gray often regretted not having spent more time refining his technique. If he had trained under the same conditions, maybe that battle would have ended differently. But now he understood. "This is why Kronos sent me back." A female voice snapped him out of his thoughts. "So what exactly are you trying to tell me?" Belder's group was kneeling on the floor, heads bowed. The woman questioning them was clearly their instructor. "You mean to tell me you used techniques I taught you to beat up a civilian, and ended up getting thrashed instead?" She was a young woman with platinum hair covering one eye, a stern, commanding presence. She was none other than Saria, the head trainer of the Saria Swordsmanship Dojo. Belder tried to defend himself, his voice trembling. "We didn't mean to bully him. We were just sparring." But his excuse only made things worse. Saria struck him so hard he flew across the room. The rest of the group shrank in fear. "You call that sparring?" she said, her voice filled with disdain. "Then what happened to you just now, wasn't that sparring too?" She pointed her sword directly at Belder's face, her expression cold and unforgiving. "I'm disappointed in all of you. Get out. From this day forward, don't you ever call yourselves students of this dojo again." Crushed, Belder and the others quietly helped each other up and limped out. Saria immediately turned back inside and knelt down respectfully. "I sincerely apologize. It seems my former students have caused you quite a bit of trouble." But Gray didn't hold any grudge. "No need to worry about it," he replied calmly. Grateful for his kindness, she smiled, then shifted the conversation. "Earlier, I heard you wanted a recommendation to the academy." Gray didn't deny it. Saria pulled a wooden sword from the rack. "To make up for the trouble Belder and the others caused, and before I write you a letter of recommendation, I need to assess your skills myself." She handed him the wooden sword. Gray accepted without hesitation. "Understood." The two squared off. Saria gave him the first move, Go ahead. Come at me whenever you're ready. Without wasting a second, Gray charged. I'm coming. He used his speed to close the distance. Surya, light on her feet, defended smoothly. Watching him move, she couldn't help but take note. His swordplay is surprisingly refined for someone his age. It's like he's fought countless battles already. Gray stayed focused, ducked low, and launched a surprise strike from the side. Surya acknowledged his skill internally. Belder and the others were completely outmatched. His movements were sharp and efficient, no wasted motion. It was clear most of his skill came from self-training, but now and then, his technique bore a strange resemblance to what's taught at the academy. Surya's curiosity grew. Has someone trained him before? It's still rough, but the talent is undeniable. She began to see him as an unpolished gem. Deciding to get serious, Surya's tone shifted. It's a shame to end things so soon, but it's time to bring this to a close. She picked up the pace. Gray didn't flinch. He darted past her, matching her step for step. With keen instincts, Surya parried, but something was off. He wasn't just keeping up, he was reading her moves. She began to question what she was seeing. Why hasn't he wavered yet? How is he keeping up with me? Fatigue started setting in. She faltered for a moment. I only meant to test him lightly, so why am I going all out? And why? Why am I afraid of this child? Gray swung hard. She stepped back, uneasy. That was just a strong strike. Right? Then the floor beneath them cracked from the force of the blow. But instead of fear, excitement lit up her eyes. Let's end it here. Yet even as she said the words, her confidence shattered literally. She stared in disbelief. Gray had just snapped her wooden sword in two. Caught off guard by what had just happened, Surya couldn't react in time. She merely stammered, her mouth agape. The broken blade of her wooden sword clattered to the cold wooden floor. Staring at the scene before him, Gray thought to himself, this feeling, it's just like back then. So I really do have that power now. But just as quickly, a sharp pain surged through his body. The sudden agony dropped him to his knees, drawing a loud cry from his lips. Alarmed, Surya asked, "What is it? Are you okay?" Gritting his teeth through the pain, Gray struggled to make sense of it. My body can't keep up with this power. Trying to stabilize himself, Gray forced his shaking body to stand and muttered weakly, I'm fine. Sweat poured down his face as he thought, I can barely stay on my feet, I shouldn't use that power so recklessly. Looking at her, he hesitated. Should I tell her about this? Noticing the strange expression on Gray's face, Surya furrowed her brow in confusion. After a moment of silence, Gray awkwardly scratched his head and gave an excuse, I was just a little distracted. Surya remained quiet, her eyes fixed on the broken sword in disbelief. Breaking my sword with a blunt wooden blade like that, it shouldn't be possible. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she drew a silent conclusion. He must realized it too. Seeing Surya stand motionless for so long, Gray started to feel nervous. Is something wrong? He asked. The more she looked at the boy standing before her, the more questions swirled in her mind. Why isn't he saying anything about it? Deep in thought, she closed her eyes and stood still for a while. Then, having come to a decision, she turned away, walked over to the trash bin, and discarded the broken wooden sword. Well then, she said. You said you wanted a recommendation to the academy, right? The tension returned to Gray's face as he responded. Yes, I heard you could help with that. Surya didn't hesitate. Yes, she confirmed. I can get you into the most prestigious academy in the kingdom, Royal Swordsmanship Academy. She paused before continuing, this time more seriously. But I advise you not to go there. Her tone darkened, and she spoke firmly. You're not suited for that place. Her words hit Gray like a plunge into icy water. His grip on the wooden sword tightened as bitter thoughts filled his head. I know. It's because I'm still too weak. In the end, I couldn't really do anything, except for that last moment. As if reading his mind, Surya spoke up again, cutting through the weight of disappointment. The place you should be aiming for is the World Union Academy. Her resolute words caused his pupils to contract in shock. Before he could speak, she continued, clearing away his confusion. Not the kingdom's top academy. The world's top academy. Her declaration left him stunned. The World Union Academy. Isn't that where sword saints and other legends came from? Overwhelmed by the thought, he asked loudly, someone like me can really get in there? But Surya shook her head, a hint of frustration in her expression. No. Not right now. She then explained the reality of his situation. You must have already realized it yourself, your body, as it is now, isn't fit to be a swordsman. Her expression turned serious and assessing as she spoke. You might be able to sneak by in the Royal Academy, relying on your skill alone. But the World Union Academy? There's no way. Not with a body that weak. How do you expect to reach that level like this? He couldn't deny her harsh words. With a hesitant nod, he muttered, Yeah, I guess you're right. For a brief moment, disappointment flickered across his eyes as heavy thoughts filled his mind. Everyone who makes it into that academy, they're monsters. With a body like mine, I don't stand a chance. Bathed in the soft light of the room, Surya stared at him with a cold expression. Her voice cut through the air, firm and sharp. Giving up already? You've still got 9 months until the entrance exam. Gray looked up, clearly shaken. Only 9 months, Surya nodded, acknowledging the tight time frame. Yes, maybe it's not enough. But her tone shifted into something stronger, unyielding. Still, trust me. Her eyes darkened with intensity, and she spoke with quiet menace. Are you ready for 9 months of hell? Gray glanced at his trembling hands and replied. Almost in a whisper, I don't want to, but I'll do it. Clenching his fist and pressing it to his chest, he raised his voice with renewed determination. Please take care of me for the next 9 months. Satisfied by his resolve, Surya grinned with approval. That's the answer I wanted. The room fell silent. A chill ran down Gray's spine as Surya stepped forward, her face twisted into something terrifying. Well then, she said with a threatening smirk, let's begin your hell. And she meant it. What followed were scenes of brutal training, day after day of grueling drills under Surya's relentless watch. Her voice echoed in every memory. Eat, train, focus. Time passed. 8 long months flew by. Now, Gray's body had transformed, toned, strong, and honed through sweat and pain. Observing his current state, Surya folded her arms, her expression pensive. You've grown stronger, she said softly, a rare hint of pride in her voice. A faint smile crossed her lips. There's nothing more I can teach you. From here on, walk forward with confidence. Gray blinked, stunned. But there's still a month left before the exam. Surya explained calmly. You'll face challenges in a place you've never been. It's best you go early and get used to it. With that, she handed him a brown pouch. This is for your travel and living expenses for 1 month. Seeing her gesture, Gray flustered and waved his hands in refusal. Isn't leaving an entire month early a bit much? Sunlight streamed through the small windows, casting long shadows across the room. Standing beside her, Gray gave a sheepish smile. It's like you're trying to kick me out of the village. A soft laugh escaped her lips. Her eyes narrowed gently as she whispered, Don't overthink it. But then Gray brought up something that made Surya freeze. I heard there's been a goblin nest discovered nearby. And there aren't many guards in the village. Her face stiffened. She didn't deny it. Yes, she said, almost too casually, a nest was found. Caught off guard, she quickly turned her head to avoid his gaze. But it doesn't concern us, she added in a measured tone. She gave him a smile, calm and reassuring. The capital will send reinforcements. We have nothing to worry about. Trying to ease his concern, she told him firmly. Go take your exam. Don't worry about us. But Gray, watching her closely, could see through it. She's lying. No reinforcements are coming. And before the village falls, she'll die. The image of Surya lying motionless on the ground, her body soaked in blood, flashed through Gray's mind, accompanied by a heavy thought. They said she was killed when she charged into the goblin's den alone. Even so, Gray pretended not to know anything and calmly replied, I understand. His quick agreement took Surya by surprise. A moment later, Gray raised his hand to his chest to express his gratitude toward her. Thank you, he said firmly, his eyes filled with confidence and determination, as if making a declaration. I'm off now. Seeing his resolve, a faint smile tugged at the corner of Surya's lips. With a genuine warmth rising from within, she sent her heartfelt wish to her young disciple. Mim, I hope you pass the exam. After Gray departed, Surya quietly made her way deep into the forest. The night sky appeared clearly, with a faint moon glowing overhead. In the middle of the clearing lay a dry skeleton, a sword stabbed straight through its mouth. Kneeling beside a smear of blood on the ground, Surya murmured. According to the scout's report, she followed the trail of blood and concluded, they're over there. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the silent night, startling her. Where are you going? As the voice faded, a familiar figure appeared on a dark tree branch. Gray. With a falsely concerned expression, he casually asked, "Master?" As Gray was moving through the woods, a loud voice called out from behind him, "Gray." He turned around and saw Surya approaching. "Why are you here?" she asked. "Weren't you supposed to be heading to the academy by now?" Leaping down from a tree branch, Gray replied calmly, "That's what I should be asking you. I thought you said the goblin den would be handled by the capital's forces." Surya waved her hand dismissively. "They said they couldn't come due to some urgent matter, so I decided to handle it myself." She added confidently, "Besides, I can take care of it on my own. Thanks to the scout's report, I know what we're dealing with." She sighed. "Their boss is a high-grade goblin. There are about 40 to 50 monsters in that den. I admit, that's a bit of a hassle." Gray frowned in thought. "A high-grade goblin?" he questioned inwardly. "No, it's not just about rank, it's about power." He had stayed behind in previous battles, observing carefully. "A goblin's true strength lies in its intelligence and leadership," he said aloud. "If you get surrounded, fighting alone is no different from suicide." Even as he spoke, a clear thought took root in his mind: if she goes in there alone, she won't make it out. And the village, it'll be destroyed. His expression hardened. "I've already seen that future with my own eyes." Breaking out of his thoughts, he declared firmly, "Then let me go with you." Surya immediately held up a hand. "I already said I'm enough." Gray's eyes burned with determination. "I don't want to miss the chance to gain real combat experience. Or, do you think I'll just get in your way?" Surya gave a knowing smile. "You and I both know that's not true. I can't even beat you in a sparring match anymore." Her voice softened as she turned slightly. "But real combat is different, especially against something like this. The den appeared out of nowhere, and it's too dangerous. Better to wait until you've got more experience." But Gray didn't back down. His voice turned sharp. "So you really are planning to go alone? Then how about this: I'll fight you. If I can take you down quickly, I'll go handle the goblins myself." A heavy silence fell between them. He didn't say another word, just stood there with his sword pointed at her. After a long moment, Surya smiled faintly. "All right, I give up." Her voice grew serious. "But you have to promise me one thing. No matter what happens." She looked him in the eye. "You have to come back alive." Gray lowered his sword. "I was planning on it," he said quietly. And with that, the two of them began moving deeper into the forest. "You too, Master. Don't you go dying on me." "Of course not." The scene shifted to the goblin den. As they moved cautiously through the area, they spoke in hushed tones. "There's not even a route for retreat," Gray noted. "They're confident, bold enough to build their den in a place like this." Surya nodded. "Which means we can't afford to make a single mistake. These aren't mindless beasts, we're dealing with intelligent monsters." "I know," Gray responded, his eyes scanning their surroundings as hers grew colder and more focused. They quickly scouted the area but couldn't locate the goblin boss. "Probably inside the main tent," one of them whispered. "Let's try thinning their numbers before the boss shows up," Surya murmured. She turned to Gray and pointed, "Take out the ones over in that direction." Looking toward the enemy camp, they saw goblins swarming the area, disgusting, grotesque creatures. "I'll handle this side," Surya said. "Got it," Gray replied. "Good," she nodded. And with that, the two of them launched forward. "Let's go." One of the goblins suddenly sensed something and spun around. In a flash, Surya lunged forward, her blade slicing cleanly through the creature's neck. Its head tumbled to the ground as another goblin behind it growled furiously at the sight. The rest of the horde erupted into chaos, their snarling cries filling the air as they began to swarm, organizing themselves and charging forward in waves. On the other side, Gray was equally fierce. With a smooth flick of his wrist, he swung his sword in a powerful arc, cutting down a cluster of goblins before they even had a chance to react. Blood splattered across the battlefield, the scene descending into total mayhem. Surya held her ground as well, fending off a dense mob of goblins pressing in from all sides. Seeing her overwhelmed, Gray dashed in with unrelenting force, his blade cleaving through the monsters. When the dust settled, they paused briefly, bodies of goblins scattered around them in all directions. Surya looked over and praised him. "Not bad." "Was that really your first time?" Gray gave her a quick warning. "Stay sharp, Master. This is only the beginning." But something gnawed at him. His brow furrowed as he observed the aftermath. This is strange, they're too weak. He studied the situation more carefully. With this level of strength, Master could have easily handled them alone. Then it hit him unless, inside the tent. He glanced sharply at the distant, looming structure. That's when he noticed it, two glowing red eyes peering out from the shadows, watching their every move. Revolting, hateful eyes. A chill ran down his spine. He turned toward Saria and shouted, "We need to go now." "Run." She blinked, startled. "What's going on?" But Gray's voice trembled with urgency. "Just run." Though confused, Saria didn't hesitate. "All right." The two of them took off at full speed, tearing through the woods. But behind them, a terrifying sound echoed. Something was chasing them. Gray's eyes widened in disbelief. Behind him now loomed a monstrous goblin, far stronger than the rest. The moment its foot struck the ground, dirt and rocks exploded into the air from sheer force. A twisted grin formed on Gray's face. "Beneath the pale moonlight," he muttered. "A high-grade goblin." Saria added, "What an honor the boss came to us." But Gray suddenly screamed, "No. That's not the boss." As if on cue, a grotesque mouth opened wide somewhere behind them, and from the shadows, more goblins surged forward, snarling and screeching in madness. Saria's breath caught. What is this?" Gray's expression turned grim. "Something even stronger. A goblin warlord." He said it with absolute certainty. "That's the real boss." A horde of goblins advanced, axes gripped tightly in their filthy hands. And behind them, the true leader emerged, a massive, hulking figure exuding sheer menace and raw power. Saria's composure broke. "A goblin warlord? We're not equipped to fight something like that." Her face tightened in distress. She shouted to the high-grade goblin blocking their path, "Kill this one, then we run." She launched another slash, striking its arm. Blood sprayed, but then, to her horror, the wound began to regenerate. Her voice trembled. "It's healing." Gray rushed forward. "It's useless." He added grimly, "That goblin warlord's roar, it's enhancing their strength, and giving them accelerated regeneration." His tone grew darker. "That's why they're so overwhelmingly strong. We can't take down any of them like this." Even as he fought, he quickly formed a plan. "Master, that goblin behind us is yours. Don't try to kill it, just stall it." Saria snapped her head toward him. "What are you planning?" His voice dropped low, steely and cold. "We've only got one option left." A wicked grin crept across his lips. With chilling calm, he declared, "Eliminate that bastard." Gray Lee swung his sword at the monster in front of him, silently cursing how annoying it was that these creatures kept ambushing him. With another slash, he struck again, but the demon retaliated without hesitation, raising its axe and swinging it at Gray. As he blocked the attack, his mind was already calculating the next move. "I just need to focus on taking down all the enemies in front of me," he thought. But in the very next second, something completely unexpected happened. Gray's sword shattered into pieces the moment he brought it down. He stared at the hilt left in his hand, stunned. His sword couldn't withstand a blow against an enhanced goblin. The goblin had no intention of giving Gray time to recover. It raised its axe and slammed it into the ground with tremendous force, sending Gray flying backward. Quickly regaining his footing, Gray drew his backup sword. "Good thing I brought a spare," he muttered. "Though it won't last long either." From a distance, Saria, engaged in her own fight, shouted, "Gray Lee, take my spare sword." Catching it mid-air, Gray felt a surge of renewed strength. "Thanks," he called out. Now wielding two swords, he prepared for a desperate battle. "Even with two blades, I still don't have enough power to clear all of them, but with just the warlord and the goblins in between." He sheathed one of his swords, then launched himself toward the goblin, slashing downward with a brilliant arc of light. "That much I can handle." The goblin wasn't going down easily. It swung its axe straight at Gray's face, slicing his cheek. Gritting his teeth, Gray used his remaining sword to block the blow. A sharp grunt escaped him as he reached behind his hip and drew his third sword. He began fighting with everything he had, surrounded by goblins swarming in from all sides. Suddenly, a terrifying glow ignited from a grotesque skull. The eyes of a goblin flared with golden light as it let out a piercing scream. Gray's eyes widened. "What the hell?" he muttered, watching as a wave of goblins surged forward, their strength enhanced by the same power. "It's boosting them too." Now empowered, the goblin swung its axe again, and all Gray could do was hold on, pushing back against its tremendous strength. You figured out my plan, didn't you? Came a roar from the goblin leader. Instantly, dozens of goblins charged toward Gray. He grit his teeth. You're smarter than you look, he muttered. Sparks flew as Gray's blade clashed with the sharp edge of the goblin's axe. After a fierce exchange, Gray finally managed to break free of the creature's relentless attacks. He backed up a step, bracing himself, then shouted with fierce resolve, "Charge!" Then, Gray darted through the swarm of goblins at full speed, moving so fast that they didn't even realize what was happening. He swung his sword with all his might, trying to cut down as many enemies as possible. I don't have time to deal with all of them. But suddenly, one goblin managed to grab him. Another one flew in from the side, swinging its axe with the clear intent to finish him off. Just as it struck, it impaled itself on Gray's sword and died instantly. That's when Gray finally realized what they were doing. They were deliberately sacrificing themselves to break his sword. He quickly looked up, and something massive blotted out the last bit of light above him. A ferocious goblin warrior came crashing down with a powerful punch aimed at his face. Gray managed to block the strike with his sword, but the impact sent him flying. Dust and debris exploded into the air. He coughed up blood, his body covered in bruises and cuts. Slowly he tried to sit up amid the shattered rocks and rubble, groaning from the pain. His eyes landed on the last sword he had left. This is it, just one sword remaining. Gray slowly rose to his feet, and looked at the swarm of goblins in front of him. One sword. And I'm supposed to fight off all of them. Including that goblin warlord? He bowed his head slightly. Even with everything I've learned before returning to the past, I know I can't win. It was a bitter admission. Still, he picked up the sword. If that's the case, he turned and shouted toward Saria, "Master, run. While they're focused on me, you have to escape." But Saria only gave a faint smirk as she gripped her sword tighter. "Sorry, but I can't do that," she replied. Gray dodged another goblin attack while still trying to convince her. "Do you want to die for nothing, Master? I'll follow after, just go without me." Saria responded softly, her eyes briefly betraying a flicker of something else. She looked down at the deep wound in her thigh. "I can't run anymore." Gray's expression collapsed in disbelief. He turned back to look at her, devastated. Then he glanced again at the last sword in his hand. There's no choice now. With no other option left, he prepared himself for a final stand against the goblins. "I came back to defeat the Purifier, and this is how it ends." He swung his chipped sword at the goblins, trying desperately to hold his ground. But the blade couldn't take it anymore. It shattered into pieces. He stared at the broken fragments at his feet, helpless. Is this really where it ends? In a place like this? Standing amidst a growing circle of goblins, now weaponless, Gray refused to give in. He clenched the hilt of the shattered sword tighter. "No, it's not over yet. If I can still draw on that power from before." He remembered the moment he'd once been pushed to the brink just like now. "If I can awaken it again, even if it's a whole army." The broken sword trembled in his grip as he forced himself to recall that feeling. "Come on, remember it, remember that sensation." Gray raised the broken sword fragment in front of him, his eyes shut tightly. Then, all of a sudden, a surge of crimson energy erupted from within. His final power had awakened at last. With one swift motion, he sliced through the necks of every goblin in front of him. The blade in his hand had now transformed into a dense black aura. Seeing this, Saria was completely stunned. "Gray," she whispered in disbelief. He stood there, face covered in blood, yet turned to her with a bright, reassuring smile. "It's all okay now." Without pause, Gray began slashing again and again, cutting down hordes of goblins like they were nothing. Even the strongest among them was split clean in half. The goblin chieftain could only watch in utter disbelief. Saria was just as stunned. She couldn't believe her student had unlocked such overwhelming power. Yet even as she watched in awe, she herself caught the massive axe of another goblin with just one hand. Calmly she turned and taunted it, "Too light." Her eyes then gleamed with a fierce light. "You've made things really difficult for me." With a casual flick of her arm, the goblin was blasted backward by sheer force. Saria thought to herself, without their war chief to enhance their strength, these creatures are nothing. It was already past midnight when the two finally finished off the last of the goblins. Breathing heavily, Gray spoke up, "Somehow we actually did it." He then held out the broken blade toward her. "I'm sorry, I broke your sword." Saria replied calmly, "Don't worry, you saved my life." She reached out to take the sword back, but then looked at him curiously. "But Gray, That last attack before she could finish, Gray collapsed to the ground, unmoving. Alarmed, Surya rushed over and shouted his name in panic, Gray. Gray slowly regained consciousness, his mind hazy. Where am I? He wondered, glancing around. Everything surrounding him was thick, inky water. Floating in the darkness was a strange door, and as he looked at it, a swirl of black smoke began to form. He stared at the hovering door in front of him. This is that power. The door continuously emitted streams of dark energy. If I open it, would I be able to claim that power? He stood still, lost in thought, weighing the consequences. Then, carefully, he took one step after another toward the door. But the moment his hand touched it, an unseen force clutched his entire body, freezing him in place. Panic shot through him, and he instantly pulled back, staggering away from the door. Clutching his chest, he struggled to breathe. I don't know how I know this, but I'm sure of it. If I open that door now, a single tear slid down Gray's cheek. I'll die. Then, a message appeared before him, a wise decision. At that moment, it was as if something deep inside Gray had awakened. His eyes flew open wide as his consciousness snapped back into the real world. Gasping for air, he found himself lying on a small bed. Surya was at his side and gently called out, Gray, you're awake. He blinked and asked hoarsely, Where am I? You're in the village infirmary, Surya replied, standing by his bedside. You've been unconscious for 5 days. I was scared you wouldn't wake up. Gray slowly raised a hand to his forehead, trying to process everything. 5 days, I really pushed myself too far. I guess my body couldn't take it. Surya looked at him, and replied calmly, I don't think push too far even begins to describe what you did. He slowly sat up and Surya, ever attentive, asked gently, Let's not talk about that now. Are you okay? Can you move? Let's see, Gray muttered, then frowned. Something was wrong. He tried to move his right arm, but it felt numb, heavy. He could barely shift it even with effort. I can move it if I really try, but can I still wield a sword with this arm? His eyes caught sight of the black markings beneath the bandages wrapped around his arm. And this mark, Surya noticed his movement and commented, Your arm isn't working too well, is it? Gray thought to himself, can't she see it? That strange mark. But aloud, he simply said, My dominant arm, it's hard to use. Surya nodded as if confirming her suspicions. Just as I thought. It's not going to heal normally anytime soon. I mean, every bone in your right arm was shattered. Stunned, Gray ran his hand over his body. My bones shattered. But it doesn't even hurt. Surya pointed to a small vial on the table beside them. We've been treating you with magical medicine. Gray's eyes widened at the sight. Magical medicine? But that's incredibly expensive. Surya sat down across from him and offered a reassuring smile. Don't worry. The village chief gave it to us. Gray was caught off guard. The village chief? Why would he give something like that to someone like me? Surya gave him a matter-of-fact look. What are you talking about, Gray? You're the hero of this village. Gray still didn't quite understand what she meant, when suddenly the door swung open with a loud bang. A silver-haired man barged in, shouting his name Gray. Startled, Gray looked at the village chief in confusion, clutching the potion in his hand. Village chief, thank you for the magic potion, he said. But the man cut him off. No, we should be thanking you. We're talking about an elven general here, an unstoppable monster. Even with reinforcements from surrounding towns, no one could harm it. And yet, such a beast set its sights on our village. The village chief rushed over and grabbed Gray's hand tightly. If you hadn't killed it, the entire village would have been wiped out. His grip tightened as he continued. Without you and Surya, this medicine, this infirmary, even the lives of those villagers you saved, none of it would still exist. Gray looked overwhelmed. You're exaggerating, he said quietly. But the village chief's gratitude was unwavering. You know I'm not. Gray's eyes dropped to the vial of potion in his hand. Maybe the chief's right, he thought. In the previous timeline, before I turned back time, this village had been destroyed in the goblin attack. The village chief stood up and bowed respectfully. If you still don't understand the weight of what you've done, I'll be more than happy to explain it in detail. He paused before continuing. I heard you're planning to take the entrance exam for the World Union Academy, is that right? Caught off guard, Gray nodded. Yes. But something clicked in his mind, and he stroked his chin, concerned. I went to kill the goblins a week before the exam. If I'd been unconscious for 5 days, That means only 2 days remain. His expression turned more serious. It takes 3 days on foot to reach the academy. I could get there in a day on horseback, but I don't have that kind of money. Suddenly he turned to the village chief and asked urgently, "I'm sorry, sir. Would you be willing to lend me a horse?" The chief turned toward the door and began walking out. "I knew you'd ask that," he said over his shoulder. "That's why I've already prepared the best horse in the village for you. With that horse you'll get there in no time." Surya, still standing nearby, added with a smile, "If you hadn't woken up today, we were planning to carry you there ourselves." Gray slowly got out of bed and opened the door, letting the natural light wash over him. But what awaited him outside took him by surprise. As he stepped out, he was met with the cheers of hundreds of villagers gathered in front of the infirmary, shouting joyfully and waving. A huge banner was raised as they cried out, "Thank you. You have to pass the exam. And thank you for saving our village." A man walked up to Gray and handed him a small pouch. "Gray, please accept this," he said. Gray reached out and took the cloth pouch, then asked, "What is this?" The man smiled and replied, "It's something the entire village chipped in for. We heard the application fee for the World Alliance Academy is expensive." Gray was momentarily at a loss for words. "Everyone, thank you so much," he finally said, filled with emotion. As he prepared to set off, he turned back and joked, "If I fail the entrance exam now, I probably won't have the courage to come back." Surya quickly stepped in to reassure him. "Don't worry," she said, turning her head with a confident smile. "There's not a single candidate at the World Alliance Academy who's taken down a goblin general." Even so, Gray still felt a tinge of insecurity. He raised his hand and lightly touched his immobile right arm. "But with my right arm in this condition," Surya cut him off firmly. "Your left arm still works, doesn't it?" Gray tested the movement in his left hand. "Yes, but that's more than enough," she interrupted again. "You don't need to rely on that power anymore." Gray turned to mount his horse, still doubtful. "But the entrance exam might not be something I can pass with just one arm." Surya stepped closer. "It's okay. The examiners at the academy aren't blind. They won't overlook what you're capable of. I promise you that." She looked him straight in the eyes and said with unwavering confidence, "You're definitely going to pass." Her words gave Gray the strength he needed. "Thank you. I can't afford to fail now, not after hearing that from you." This village had been destroyed in his previous timeline, but now, it still stood. This world was no longer the same. The future could be changed. And with this power, Gray looked back at the villagers one last time, and said his goodbyes. "I'm off now." Not long after, Gray finally arrived at the testing site. He patted his horse gently. "Thanks, buddy. I made it just in time thanks to you." He raised his gaze to the grand castle before him. "So, this is the World Alliance Academy." In front of Gray stood the towering building of the World Union Academy, majestic under the clear blue sky. Amid the tranquil atmosphere, a voice suddenly rang out, the examiners announcing, "We will now begin distributing the exam sheets. Until this process is complete, all candidates must remain in the central arena." As soon as the announcement ended, murmurs erupted among the crowd below. "Are we all candidates?" one asked. "But only about 20 of us will pass," another replied. Someone mentioned past exams. "I heard the number of successful candidates changes every year. Sometimes they accept 50, but in other years, only one makes it." Just then, the examiner's voice cut through the noise again. "Now, please welcome Professor Ariel." Without delay, a woman with long red hair appeared before the gathered crowd. Her presence drew gasps of admiration. With a mysterious smile she spoke, "Let's begin. We will now distribute your exam sheets. Candidates, please take the paper that appears in front of you." She snapped her fingers. A strange golden light formed high above, and from it, a sheet of paper materialized in front of Gray. He quickly reached out and caught it, only to find his candidate number printed on it, 513. Seeing that everyone had received their sheets, Professor Ariel's voice carried down from above, "It looks like you all have your papers. Some of you may be surprised to see nothing written except your number and exam area. Don't worry, this is the same every year." She then reinforced the Academy's principles. The World Union Academy does not discriminate based on age, gender, nationality, status, or anything else, she declared while gripping the edge of the table. "Not even your name." Then, with a chilling smile, she added, "Your name doesn't matter to us." The entrance to the Academy stood tall in the distance as her voice echoed with finality. Only those who pass the exam and cross that bridge will be asked for their name. You may even give us a false one, if you like." Gray looked down at the exam paper in his hand and frowned, grumbling to himself. "I left my sword back at the inn. So why does it say I'm in the swordsmanship division? What kind of system is this?" Almost as if reading everyone's minds, Professor Uriel, her tone haughty, continued, "I assigned your areas based on how I see you." Then coldly she added, "If I was wrong, raise your hand." Her blunt statement sparked a wave of unrest. She picked our exam areas just by looking at us? She's got to be joking. There's no way she did that with this many people. They must have tested us beforehand, someone speculated. Or maybe she used some kind of mind-reading magic. But when no one raised their hand, the professor looked pleased. It seems no one's in the wrong area. Then she moved on. "The wait is over. I will now announce your schedules. Please check your ticket." Gray immediately examined the paper again. A line of black text appeared, "Candidate No. 513, Swordsmanship Division, Day 1, 11 a.m. His eyes widened in shock. "Damn it up, I'm up on the first day. I was hoping to buy some time for my arm to heal." He fell silent for a moment, visibly distressed. Professor Ariel's expression darkened. She looked down with a serious gaze and delivered a stern warning. "This is a one-time practical exam. If you're late, you will be disqualified. No exceptions. We do not accept personal requests to change the schedule." Meanwhile, Gray held his injured arm tightly, anxiety building in his chest. "I still can't exert much strength with my dominant arm. Please, just heal a little by tomorrow. Just a little." The next day came in the blink of an eye. As Gray arrived at the testing grounds, he looked at his injured arm in growing panic. It hadn't healed at all. "I guess I'll have to fight with my arm still like this." Suddenly, the examiner's voice rang out, snapping him out of his thoughts. Gray could only nod and mumble in response. "Next candidate, please wait by the arena entrance." Trying to steady himself, Gray took a deep breath and whispered encouragement to himself. "All right, no, I can't afford to be pessimistic right now." Gripping his right hand, he reminded himself, "My left arm works perfectly fine. And I can still move my right arm, at least a little." After regaining his composure, he began to think through his approach in broken thoughts. "I need to use the remaining time to watch how the examiner fights, find any openings, and in front of him, a match between the examiner and another candidate was already underway. The examiner calmly said, "You may attack first." The examinee didn't hesitate. "Fine by me." Without waiting, he charged forward with a shout, swinging his sword with full force. The blade slammed into the wooden floor with a thunderous sound, kicking up a thick cloud of white smoke. As the smoke began to clear, the examiner stood motionless, completely unscathed. Seeing that his attack had done nothing, the examinee growled in frustration, "Chech, I'm not done yet." With that, he roared and poured all his strength into another heavy strike aimed directly at the examiner. But to his dismay, the examiner easily blocked the blow. Shocked, the examiner gasped, "No way." Before he could react, the examiner's counter came in a flash. His sword was knocked clean out of his hands. The examinee was hurled backward, crashing hard into the floor with such force it sounded like an explosion. He clutched his arm, unable to get up, his face pale with disbelief. Then, a cold voice pierced the air like a slap back to reality. "Your test is over. You may retrieve your weapon and leave." The examinee stared blankly for a moment before muttering in defeat, "I see." Watching the scene unfold, Gray's lips twitched into a stiff smile. But almost instantly his face froze in dread. Deep down, something within him crumbled. "I'm screwed." The examiner's voice rang out again, breaking his daze. "Next, number 513. Gray straightened his expression and responded firmly. "Yes, sir," though his mind was spinning. "You want me to fight the guy who just wiped out someone bigger than me?" Just like before, the examiner opened the match with the same line, "You may attack first." Gray nodded with quiet determination. "All right." Even as he stood on the dueling platform, Gray couldn't stop his body from trembling. He tried to comfort himself, thinking, "Honestly, I don't see any chance of winning. But I'll do everything I can." Shaking off the endless stream of doubts, he charged straight at the examiner with his sword raised, shouting, "Here I come." As he ran forward, Saria's teachings echoed in his mind. A sword isn't swung with just your arm. You channel power created by your whole body through your arm. With determination and faith in himself, Gray clung to the hope that Surya had instilled in him. That's what you taught me, right, teacher? Even if my right arm is weak, if I can shift the force through other muscles in a flash. He swung his sword. The blade narrowly missed the examiner. But even as he attacked, a conflict stirred inside him. But I can't fight the way I normally do. If swinging a sword without using my arm was this easy, no one would bother training their bodies in the first place. The examiner suddenly retaliated with a slash of his own. Watching the motion of the blade closely, Gray noticed something. His sword. It's a little slow. Recognizing that weakness, he managed to block the strike. Even while fending off the attack, his thoughts raced. He's incredibly strong, but his speed and technique are nothing like my teacher's. If I rely on the swordsmanship she taught me, I might be able to make up for the lack of power in my arm. Now that he had found a viable strategy, action began to overtake thought. He launched into a flurry of fast, precise strikes. The tactic worked, his deduction had been spot on. That's right, he's definitely slower. Caught off guard by the sudden barrage, the examiner began to look tense and shaken. Staying laser-focused, Gray assessed the situation calmly. He's not as strong as I thought. In his mind, the bright, confident smile of Surya appeared, her voice ringing with belief. You'll pass for sure. Right now, all he could think about was her as teacher. Fueled by her encouragement, Gray pushed forward with unwavering determination. With a final burst of strength, he knocked the examiner's sword flying. His heart burned with passion. I really can do this. The battle between the two raged on fiercely. It was a match defined by speed. The examiner's relentless attacks showed no sign of stopping, and Gray was forced to raise his defense to the limit. Even though he had managed to read the opponent's sword technique, Gray still found himself at a disadvantage. His grip tightened on the sword as he prepared to counterattack. Then, without hesitation, he struck at the examiner's shoulder. But the man's experience allowed him to dodge with ease. Doubt flickered in Gray's mind, but he had no intention of giving up. The difference in strength is still too much. I can't break through his guard. Winning with one arm is harder than I thought. Gray continued his relentless offense, pushing his speed to its limits. Slowly but surely, the instructor began to show openings. Gray caught on quickly. He says otherwise, but his movements are getting clumsier. It's risky, but if I act now. Without a second thought, Gray abruptly pulled his sword back, throwing the examiner off balance. Ready to execute his plan, he narrowed his eyes. Come on, take the bait. Just as expected, the examiner lunged forward. A glint of confidence flashed across Gray's face. Got you. That swing was too strong and far too obvious. He stepped back into a defensive stance, but instead of blocking, he sidestepped skillfully, circling around to his opponent's blind spot. The examiner panicked as Gray slipped behind him. Gray's heart surged with hope. No matter how strong he is, if I can get behind him, using all the speed he had, Gray dashed in. Just then, the referee's voice rang out across the arena. Stop. Gray's blade stopped mere inches from the examiner, separated only by a thin layer of fabric. Gray stood frozen, exhausted and unwilling to accept it. Is it really over? Isn't it too soon to stop? From the elevated platform, the referee made the final call. The match had ended due to time. The result a draw. Stunned, Gray couldn't hide his disappointment. There was nothing he could do now. Hands trembling, he loosened his grip on his sword and finally let it fall to his side. Defeated, he turned and walked off the stage. I gave it everything I had, but if I couldn't beat someone like him, what kind of struggles will I face from now on? Gray took one last look at the arena, his heart heavy with regret. Thank you, teacher. 1 week later, in Conference Room 53 of the World Alliance Academy, 6 members of the examination board gathered. The large room was filled with silence as the group deliberated. The bespectacled elder headmaster of the academy opened the discussion. So, what are your thoughts on the candidates? The exams are complete. A brown-haired man answered dryly, exhausting. Sitting nearby, an older instructor cautiously offered his thoughts. Honestly, I don't think the way we all observe together is efficient. We should consider splitting responsibilities next year. A mustached man in the room, clearly more interested in gains than logistics, spoke firmly. We can't afford to overlook talented individuals just to save ourselves a little effort. The principal could only sigh in defeat at how indifferent the other members were. I'm asking for your opinions on the students, not the testing system. Let's begin with the swordsmanship training course. Small screens lit up across the desk. One of them asked, "So, who passed?" The cautious instructor from earlier began to analyze the candidates carefully, taking in everyone's feedback. As usual, those who managed to defeat the examiner automatically passed. For the others, their performance quality, and whether they could hold out for the full 15 minutes were taken into account. The instructors in charge of the swordsmanship course were asked for their thoughts. Aside from those who beat the examiners, candidates 5,217, and 753 stood out the most. The brown-haired man cut in. "Let's keep the list at that. Even if the others pass, they won't be able to keep up in class." The man with the mustache also gave his approval, likely because it worked in his favor. "I agree. Anyone else?" The room fell silent. Not a single disagreement was voiced. The principal concluded, "Then we're all in agreement. The final list of those accepted into the swordsmanship course is confirmed." Just then, someone raised a separate point. "What about candidate 513? The unexpected suggestion drew the principal's attention. The one who spoke was the red-haired woman who had been quiet the whole time. "What does everyone think about candidate 513? The man in round sunglasses remained silent, while the gloomy-looking one raised an eyebrow. 513. The mustached man pulled up footage of Gray's match. "This kid. Sure, he looked like he was about to win. But if he has to rely on traps to beat an examiner, I doubt he'll keep up in the long run. His technique is fine, but he's still way too weak." From beginning to end, he was completely overwhelmed. The principal hesitated. If that's the case, the mustached man immediately shut down the idea of adding Gray. The red-haired woman sighed in frustration. Watching the others, she was disheartened. With this many people observing, not one of them noticed. If everyone is this short-sighted, then maybe this shared observation method is a waste of time after all. The meeting ended. The next day, everyone gathered to receive their results. Gray was there too, holding the notice in his hand. Candidate 513, Swordsmanship Course, Day 1, 11 a.m. From the clock tower, the loudspeakers rang out, now announcing the accepted candidates for the swordsmanship course. A total of 6 have been selected. Gray held the notice tightly, anticipation building in his chest. This is it. As each name was called, the corresponding notice would burst into flames. Candidate 5, Candidate 217, Candidates 432 and 615, Candidate 753, and Candidate 925. That is all. These 6 have been officially accepted. Gray froze in place, overcome with disbelief. He had been rejected. The announcement continued. "Accepted candidates, please cross the bridge and complete your enrollment by the end of today." The crowd was a whirlwind of emotions: joy, sorrow, regret. Gray stood in quiet despair. "So I really didn't make it." Then the loudspeaker blared again, now announcing the recipient of the Divine Eye Special Admission. Candidate 513. Unlike the regular acceptance notices, Gray's paper was engulfed in a blue flame. In that instant, all eyes turned to him. He stared at the burning paper in disbelief. "Me? I got in?" The surrounding crowd erupted into chatter, most of it sarcastic. "Divine Eye Special Admission, huh? So they're doing that again this year?" Confused, Gray tried to process it. "Divine Eye Special Admission? I've never even heard of that before." The mocking continued, especially from those who had been accepted. "That's basically a backdoor pass, right? The World Alliance Academy's really going downhill." The words crept into his mind, shaking his confidence. "A backdoor? But I don't know anyone. Could it be Master?" But he never said anything. From within the crowd, an elderly man leaning on a cane stepped forward and scolded those who had spoken carelessly. Hey, don't talk nonsense about the Divine Eye Special Admission like that. It's a prestigious honor that has produced heroes for over 100 years." But the others brushed off his words with disdain. "Old folks really are obsessed with that Divine Eye stuff, huh? Isn't that just some has-been glory from the past?" More voices chimed in, whispering among themselves. "Lately, all the Divine Eye admits have been complete failures. Amy White, Belle Albright, Leek Mueller, and Jacob Bloomfield too." Gray didn't argue. He simply stood there, enduring the sneers and jabs in silence. "Yeah, total failures, the whole bunch. Even we, the current batch of candidates, know that. But as those names echoed in his mind, something stirred in Gray. Amy White, Belle Albright, and Jacob Bloomfield, those three had once been key members of the main force that fought against the liquidators. Just the thought sparked a faint glimmer of hope in him. To think my name is being mentioned in the same breath as theirs. Morning light gently bathed the entire academy, casting everything in a soft, tranquil glow. The main building stood majestically amid a thin veil of mist, while the canal encircling it flowed quietly by. A steady stream of students poured in. From the loudspeakers came a clear announcement: the entrance ceremony would begin in 30 minutes. If you've finished changing into your uniforms, please gather in the square in front of the main office. Groups of students in the academy's uniforms began appearing along the cobblestone paths. Their deep blue coats trimmed with gold gleamed under the morning sun, and on their left chest, the silver academy emblem sparkled proudly. Among the crowd heading toward the square, one figure stood out. Gray walked with a composed air, exuding a cold, enigmatic presence that drew attention. A few students began to gather, some nervously glancing around and whispering to each other to confirm they were in the right place. "This is the square in front of the main office, right?" one asked. "I guess so," the other replied, equally unsure. "There's nothing here though. Are we really in the right spot?" Suddenly, a man came rushing toward the students, panting slightly from the exertion. I'm so sorry." There was a bit of confusion, and the preparations were delayed. One of the students looked puzzled. "Preparations?" The man continued, "Would you mind stepping back a little so I can place the staircase right here?" The students glanced at each other in confusion but complied, shuffling backward. Is this far enough?" someone asked. The man turned toward them with a calm smile. "Perfect." Then, right before their eyes, he knelt down in the middle of the schoolyard and pressed his palm against the ground, muttering under his breath, "All right." In an instant, a radiant magic circle burst to life beneath him, flooding the space with blinding golden light. Intricate magical patterns wove together, blazing like a miniature sun. Bolts of red-orange lightning surged through the air, crackling with power and intensity. The ground trembled, and the atmosphere seemed to compress under the weight of an immense force on the verge of eruption. Those watching could only gape in astonishment, their minds reeling from the overwhelming display. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the spectacle vanished. The sky cleared like the calm after a violent storm. The man stood up as if nothing had happened, completely unfazed. "Apologies for the delay," he said coolly. "You may sit anywhere you like." The students were still in shock, their lips trembling as they replied, "Why yes." They looked around, trying to make sense of what had just happened. "That was teleportation magic, wasn't it?" someone muttered in disbelief. "They can teleport something this huge?" Another gasped through clenched teeth. Gray sat calmly on a bench, deep in thought. They must wanted the entrance ceremony held in a place with a clear view of the academy, but to use teleportation magic so extravagantly. He turned his head and smiled brightly, as if something had just clicked in his mind. "So this is the power of the World Alliance Academy." Gray glanced over at the two students chatting nearby and commented in a quiet voice, "There are way too many seats. If only 30 students were accepted, why would they need this many?" The short-haired girl gave an awkward smile. "You didn't know?" The other girl looked slightly embarrassed. "Sorry, I don't know much besides swordsmanship." The short-haired girl chuckled and offered, "Then let me explain." As she spoke, she twirled her finger in the air in rhythm with her voice. "The World Alliance Academy, as its name suggests, gathers the most exceptional students from all over the world." Suddenly she gasped, pointing excitedly, "Look! They're here." The other girl turned in surprise, eyes widening in disbelief. Before her was a scene straight out of a fantasy. High above the crystal blue sky, colossal airships drifted gracefully through the clouds. Their polished hulls shimmered under the morning light, and their massive sails billowed with the wind, like majestic flying warships. Amidst the airships and hot air balloons, enormous winged creatures soared, dragons, their vast wings beating the sky as they glided effortlessly above. The girl let out a stunned scream. What is all this?" The grand airships continued to float in stately silence. Gray's eyes widened in shock. "The Strato Queen, a magical airship. I once boarded it when I joined the Purge Suppression Squad. They say it's one of the largest airships in the world. And they brought it here just for an entrance ceremony." He let out a small laugh. "No wonder they call this place the World Alliance Academy." As the ships descended and dust scattered into the air, students from across the globe stepped out in neat lines, their expressions calm and composed. The headmaster, beaming with delight, stepped forward and placed his hand on the podium. It looks like everyone has arrived. Well then, let's begin the entrance ceremony. The loudspeakers crackled to life. Thank you, headmaster, for that inspiring address. Gray leaned back with his arms crossed, stifling a yawn. So, even the entrance ceremony at the World Alliance Academy isn't that different after all. But then his eyes narrowed in surprise when he heard the next announcement. Now, we invite the top student from each department to give a brief greeting. First, Leonhardt, top of the swordsmanship division, please come forward. Leonhardt stood up and gave a polite bow. Yes, sir. As he descended the steps, murmurs and praises rippled through the crowd. That's him. The one who defeated a proctor with a single strike during the exam. No kidding. They say his sword skills are on par with the instructor's. Leonhardt reached the front and bowed deeply, hand over his heart in a show of respect to the faculty. Leonhardt Apias. A student who clearly lived up to the title of top of his class. His expression carried a serious aura, the kind that commanded attention. Gray let out a quiet sigh, pondering something. Leonhardt politely raised a hand. May I ask once more, am I free to speak openly? One of the professors smiled and nodded. Of course. Upon receiving permission, Leonhardt thanked them and suddenly turned to face the gathered students. I have something I wish to say to this academy. He spoke with poise. First, to all of you, not just the students, but every individual who earned their admission through proper channels, being here with you is a true honor. He placed a hand on his chest to show his sincerity. Let's work together so that we may all graduate and become people who contribute to the world. I genuinely look forward to the days we'll share, advancing together as proud students of this esteemed institution. He paused. Then his tone shifted, sharp as a blade. However, it's unfortunate that among us, there is one who does not deserve to be here. Isn't that right, Professor Ariel? She was closing her eyes, savoring the bustling atmosphere, when suddenly she heard her name being called. Startled for a moment, she quickly regained her composure and responded calmly. Every student here has passed a rigorous entrance exam. They may not be as strong as you, but excluding them wouldn't be fair. And why are you asking me this? Leonhardt's face grew stern, a hint of anger flashing in his eyes. I'm not talking about the students who passed the exam fairly. I'm talking about the one who was handpicked by a professor and admitted through the Divine Eye special admission. The student who was given preferential treatment, he declared, then shouted with authority, pointing toward the crowd of seated students. Step forward, return your uniform, and leave the academy at once. The students erupted into murmurs and whispers at Leonhardt's bold demand. Gray shifted uneasily in his seat, a bit anxious. What's with the drama, he thought. Well, good thing he doesn't know what I look like. If I just sit tight, maybe I'll be fine. Ariel let out a chuckle. Hemph, looks like this year's freshmen are quite the lively bunch. But Leonhardt stayed defiant. Professor, I'm serious. Please stop admitting students through backdoor favoritism. And a sudden breeze cut through the air, swift and silent. Before anyone could react, Ariel was already standing behind Leonhardt, whispering softly, Do you really think you're stronger than that student? Leonhardt turned, shouting into the open air, What? Of course I am. You think I'm wrong. Ariel smiled with amusement. I like that attitude. Then let's place a bet. Leonhardt blinked in confusion. A bet? Arms crossed and utterly composed, Ariel smirked with full confidence. Yes, I bet everything, my position as a professor, and that student's right to be enrolled. Gray was caught off guard by the proposal and asked hesitantly, A bet? Saria, equally confused, turned to Professor Ariel. Are you saying I have to fight that special admission brat? Ariel didn't even bother to open her eyes, waving her hand dismissively. I would never do something so crude. Adjusting her glasses, she opened her eyes and looked Saria dead in the face. Besides, if you were to go all out, you'd die. As a teacher, I can't let my students get hurt. Veins began to bulge on Saria's face, and his expression darkened as he glared at her. Are you trying to provoke me? He growled. But Ariel remained calm and unfazed by his anger. I'm being serious, she replied evenly. That's why we'll wager using monsters instead of people. It'll be safer that way. After a brief pause, she continued. Besides, aren't you better at fighting monsters than people anyway? Suria's rage flared again. So you've been watching me, huh? Fine, what exactly is the wager? Ariel smirked, clearly satisfied that her trap had been sprung. Suddenly, a hand shot up in the crowd. Ariel raised her voice, simple. The challenge is to slay a monster I choose. She began explaining the rules in detail. For each round the monster would become increasingly stronger. Whoever failed to kill their target first would be the loser. Gray sat in his seat, rubbing his forehead in resignation while Ariel continued, if he loses, I'll resign as a professor and all the special admission students will be expelled. But if you lose, you'll have to follow every order I give you. Suria's defiant expression was clearly reflected in the lenses of Ariel's glasses. Calmly she extended her hand toward him. So, what do you say? He instinctively reached for the sword at his hip. Tell me what the first targets are. I'm confident I can take down any enemy, but I'm not about to walk into some ridiculous trap. Ariel placed a hand on her chin, pretending to think it over. Let's see, how about an orc general for the first one? Or is that too easy for you? The entire hall erupted in gasps at the mention of the target. Gray crossed his arms and narrowed his eyes. An orc general. Why would she pick that one specifically? Suria, on the other hand, couldn't contain his fury. He slammed the table in front of him. Are you kidding me? Sweat began to form on his forehead. An orc general isn't something a person can just take down alone. But Ariel simply smiled at his reaction. I never said you had to kill it right away. You'll have the rest of the year to do it. That's reasonable, isn't it? Suria wasn't having it. If it only took a year of training to solo a disaster-class monster, people wouldn't have to struggle so much. Pick something realistic. He paused, letting out a frustrated sigh. Then suddenly smirked, tightening his grip. So that's your plan. You picked an unbeatable target just to end the bet without anyone winning. I'm not falling for it. Ariel slowly stepped toward him. Then how about this, we'll add one more condition. If it ends in a draw, you win. Suria blinked, caught off guard. What? Ariel continued, in other words, if the kid can't beat the orc general by the end of the year, I'll automatically be fired, and every special admission student will be expelled. She gave him a playful wink. So what do you say? Suria stared at her in disbelief, his voice trembling with fear as he asked, Are you insane? I get the feeling the outcome of this bet has already been decided. Ariel simply turned and walked away, still smiling. So I'll take that as you having no objections. Not entirely reassured, Suria added one more condition, just to be clear. It has to be a fully intact goblin general, no weakening it beforehand or anything like that. Ariel raised her hand, and a gentle light shimmered into view. With a casual wave, a pen and a blank sheet of paper materialized. I've written everything down in this magical contract, she said as the contract floated in front of Suria. If you have no further issues, sign here. He took a moment to read the document carefully, then signed it without hesitation. I'm in. Even after signing, Suria couldn't help but ask, seriously, do you really think that kid can win? Ariel didn't bother to answer. She turned and walked away. Who knows, she replied casually. Returning to her seat, she sat down with complete composure. As soon as she left, the rest of the students in the hall broke into murmurs. What's wrong with Professor Ariel? One whispered. You think that old hag's just using this bet as an excuse to retire? Another scoffed. She's probably been washed up for years now. But Ariel paid no attention to the ridicule swirling around her. She kept smiling, her eyes focused on the contract she held in her hand. Meanwhile, Gray sat with a long sigh, silently thinking, great. The bet's officially on now. Then suddenly his eyes snapped open, his expression sharpening. Wait a second, why does it feel like she already counted on him beating that thing before the school year even started, just so she could say the time limit is within this year? Ariel clearly noticed the way Gray was staring at her. He kept thinking hard. So she planned it all from the beginning, huh? Ariel lifted a finger to her lips, subtly signaling him to keep quiet. Gray couldn't help but mutter to himself, she really plays dirty. Back in the classroom, another teacher had already taken the podium and started calmly lecturing. Now then, let's begin today's introductory lesson on magic, he announced, placing a large book on the desk. Some of you might be surprised that the lectures begin on day one, but as students of this academy, you must learn that not a single day should be wasted. Let's start with the basics, he said, raising his hand as a soft blue glow radiated from it. The use of magic. He then began explaining how magic worked, the presence of an invisible energy source called ether within the body, and how to channel it through the body's mana circuits. The teacher remained focused at the front, delivering his lecture with clarity, while the students below listened attentively. Gray sat quietly among them, thinking to himself, I was worried I might fall behind. But this stuff's manageable. We covered it back at the training camp. Then his eyes shifted toward something or someone. He was staring at the blonde-haired boy seated right at the front of the class. Out of all the dozens of classes I could have ended up in, I had to land in the same one as him. Resting his cheek on his hand in frustration, he muttered internally, Please don't let anyone find out I'm a special admittance Mystic Eye student. Suddenly, a voice cut through his thoughts. Hey, you there. You look bored out of your mind. We haven't even hit the 5-minute mark and you're already looking elsewhere. Bold of you. Gray was caught off guard, stammering, I'm sorry. Damn, he thought. He caught me with just one glance. And I'm all the way in the back too. The professor closed the book in his hand and said, If you're that confident, why don't you show the class a little something? I'm sure you know how to use basic magic, right? Gray stood up, visibly flustered, and tried to explain, with all due respect, sir, we're enrolled in the swordsmanship course. I thought it was fine if we didn't know magic. Still holding the thick book, the professor reminded him, even if you rely solely on your sword in real combat, you still need to understand basic magic to work alongside mages. You must be able to sense and grasp the feeling of manipulating ether. Gray didn't know how to respond. He froze for a second. This was exactly what they taught him at the training camp. If that was the case, would the spell they were about to learn also be the same? He then asked the professor. The spell we're going to learn, would it happen to be Ether Bullet? The professor returned to his podium, slightly intrigued. Oh, you know it? Can you cast it? Yes, sir, Gray replied, letting out a quiet sigh of relief. He felt like he'd just dodged a bullet. That hellish training camp wasn't a waste after all. The professor continued, perfect opportunity. Let's turn this into a match. Leon, you can use Ether Bullet too, can't you? Leon stood up and answered confidently, of course. Then he added, But sir, I've trained in both swordsmanship and magic long before enrolling. Isn't it risky to have me go up against him for real? The professor remained firm. No matter the skill gap, you'll only be using Ether Bullets. He won't die from that. And I'm not asking you to hold back either. But just so you know, that silver-haired kid over there, he's this year's Eye of God special admission student. Leon blinked in disbelief. What? The rest of the class all turned to look at Gray with surprise. Gray, overwhelmed by the sudden attention, felt completely out of sorts. Then he caught a glimpse of the calculating glint in the professor's eyes. Great, he thought. He just spilled everything. Leon slammed his hand on the desk. So that's it. In that case, I'll make sure to properly teach him. He turned back around with a scowl. I'll show him what this academy is really about. Then, locking eyes with Gray, he said through gritted teeth, Get on the platform. Gray was speechless. He had no idea how to respond to that kind of intensity. The two students stepped up to the platform, facing off with the professor standing between them. All right, he announced. When I give the signal, fire your Ether Bullets at your opponent. Gray looked cautious. I only trained in magic for a few days at that camp, he thought. Even if the professor says we won't die, I'm not sure I'll walk away unscathed. Then, the professor shouted, Begin. Leon immediately started summoning his magic, raising his voice in challenge. I'll show you the difference in our power. Gray didn't back down, doing his best to summon the strongest Ether Bullet he could. I've got no choice now. Screw it. Moments later, the two energy blasts flew toward each other, and then something unexpected happened. Both of them stared in disbelief and exclaimed in unison, What the hell? The two clashed in a dramatic showdown, their powers colliding to form a blinding circular burst of blue light. Both of them froze in shock, their eyes widening and hearts skipping a beat. Huh? The light began to swirl violently and hurtled straight toward Leon, forcing him to stumble back in panic. His eyes bulged in terror as he screamed, realizing the incoming force was too fast to avoid. Suddenly, a large man rushed in out of nowhere, throwing himself in front of the blast with arms spread wide to shield the students. His face, framed by the violent glow, showed unwavering resolve. In that instant, the entire room lit up like day. Saria sat frozen in her seat, completely stunned by the sight unfolding before her. That was close. The man exhaled deeply, wiping the sweat that had broken out across his face. The glowing mass began to fracture, revealing deep cracks across its surface as it destabilized. Just then, a fearless young man leapt straight into the heart of the crumbling light. The force of his jump stirred a powerful gust that swept through the hall, making the spectators flinch and shield their faces. He landed inside the electrified burst, kneeling with fierce determination, his eyes burning with self-sacrifice. Within minutes, Surya collapsed to the ground, screaming in agony. The man sprinted over like the wind, frantically calling out, "Leon, are you okay?" Leon trembled as he struggled to lift his head and look at the man before him. Blood stained the corner of his mouth, but he managed to feint. "I'm fine." The man didn't ask further, only nodded and said, "Good, thank goodness." But his gaze sharpened as he scanned the surroundings, clearly on high alert. If it weren't for the protective barrier to absorb part of the impact, that kid would have died. The recent blast had left the room in ruin, the air thick with dust and tension. Even among the faculty, no one had ever unleashed an ether bullet with such force. The man tilted his head and asked sternly, What exactly did you just do?" The boy didn't respond immediately. He stared down at his palm, his brow furrowed in deep thought. "That didn't feel right. It wasn't the same spell I learned before." His pupils contracted sharply. "Wait, is the ether bullet I learned in the suppression team different from the one they teach here at the academy?" His fists clenched, his red eyes glowing with frustration. Placing a hand respectfully over his chest, he asked, "Did I cast it wrong?" The man sighed and replied, "No. That was definitely an ether bullet. But the one you used wasn't normal, it wasn't standard issue. What you just cast was a compressed version. A Pather-type ether. A rare, high-density form of magic, hidden within a sphere that radiates intense power." The entire auditorium buzzed with chatter as countless questions flew around. "Compressed ether? I've never even heard of that before." The man promptly responded, "It's a form of energy so complex that even we, the professors, struggle to produce it. Yet in that moment you managed to form it and turn it into a spell. There's not a single person in this academy capable of recreating what you just did." His words reignited the room's discussion. "That's the first time I've seen an ether bullet that powerful. Could the Divine Vision admissions be all about this moment? If so, they should have placed him in the magic division from the beginning, instead of giving him a special exemption." Gray thought to himself, "That's impossible. All the spells we learned in the suppression squad's training camp were like that. In fact, I was always one of the weaker ones. Because I had such low aptitude, I got defeated in every single match." He looked up with a serious face and asked, "Professor, are you kidding me? Anyone could do that with the right training." The corner of the professor's mouth lifted ever so slightly, which only left Gray more confused. And then the professor burst into hearty laughter, squinting his eyes as he laughed so hard his shoulders shook. Gray froze, baffled by what was so funny. Suddenly the professor leaned in close, catching Gray off guard with a proposition he couldn't immediately reject. "How about transferring to the magic division? I'll vouch for you personally. You clearly have more talent in magic than in swordsmanship." Gray looked away awkwardly, clenching his fists and muttering, "I'll have to decline. I've heard I'm not that good at magic." The professor's voice boomed. "Are you kidding me? You understand ether compression so well you managed to create compressed ether at your age. That's a 1 in a million talent even by the Academy's standards. I can personally vouch for that." He added sharply, "I don't know which idiot told you that you had no talent, but they clearly had no idea what they were talking about." "Gray, are you absolutely sure you don't want to transfer?" The crowd couldn't help but murmur in amazement. That professor never praises anyone, and he just said all that. That's unbelievable. Then the professor jabbed a finger toward Gray's face, and spoke with a deadly serious tone. "It would be a tragedy for the world if you didn't study magic. I'd even call it a crime against the arcane arts." Gray could only respond with a faint, awkward smile. He froze briefly, surprised by a realization. "Wait, what did he just say? Ether compression techniques? I feel like I've heard about that before." His mind drifted back to the past. Back then, people didn't know about OD, also known as life force. That made casting magic extremely difficult. You had to keep compressing ether inside your body, then try to gather and use the bits that happened to mix with OD. Suddenly Bella chimed in, "Now that I think about it, isn't that kind of ridiculous?" Gray continued, "Professor, do you know anything about OD?" The professor furrowed his brows, thinking deeply before asking in return, "OD? What's that?" As the man pondered the term, Gray's mind started to piece things together. That reaction, it confirms it. This world hasn't discovered OD yet. Which means, everything I learned in the suppression squad. His eyes widened in shock. That's knowledge from the future. He clenched his fists with renewed determination. I need to be extremely careful about who I share this with. But the professor wasn't finished yet. So, do you want to switch over to the magic division or not? He bowed his head respectfully, and replied with utmost politeness. I'm sorry, but I don't love swordsmanship. I truly appreciate the offer, but I'm afraid I have to decline. The professor sighed helplessly. If that's your decision, then so be it. But if you ever change your mind, come find me anytime, he said, his hand clenched tightly with determination. Gray scratched his head, replying softly, "Thank you so much for the offer, sir." The professor then pointed toward the stands. "You can return to your seat now. I won't hold it against you if you space out during lectures, or even walk out of boredom. These lessons are far too basic for someone like you." As soon as he said that, the room erupted in whispers of disbelief. A group of students began murmuring among themselves, showering Gray with praise. "That's insane. Professor Carlos actually holds him in such high regard." Carlos stood up and silently watched Gray's back as he walked away. Just then, a man nervously tugged at his tie over and over. Rising from his seat, he addressed Gray with an awkward yet oddly warm voice, "Mr. Gray." A chill ran down Gray's spine. What the hell? Why do I feel so creeped out right now? Later that afternoon, he was summoned to an office after class. Ariel? He thought, as he strode down the empty hallway with his long legs. In his hand was a letter, and his face was full of confusion. Why am I being summoned so suddenly? Could it be Professor Carlos again? Just imagining that stern face made him scratch his head in frustration. Don't tell me Ariel's going to try and talk me into switching departments too. He stopped in front of a wooden door intricately carved with ornate details, hesitating. He kept rereading the letter. Finally he knocked politely. A voice echoed from inside. "Gray, right? It's not locked." Head slightly bowed, he stepped in. "Pardon me." But just as he entered, he sensed something flying straight at him. In an instant he drew his sharp sword, and without hesitation, thrust it forward toward the incoming object. The girl in the room gasped in horror, her mouth hanging open in shock. Gray's body remained in a combat stance, sword still extended. My body moved on its own, he thought, stunned. What the hell is going on? He panicked as he looked at the girl now sitting on the floor, trembling in fear as the tip of his blade hovered inches from her. His eyes widened. Huh? He muttered, recognizing her. The girl, still shaken, exhaled in relief. I swear I've seen her somewhere before, he thought, watching as she nervously glanced up at him, still visibly terrified. Gray was in control. He watched as the green-haired girl recoiled in fear, and a sense of familiarity washed over him. This girl. As he got a better look at her face, his suspicion deepened. I swear I've seen her somewhere before. A voice chimed in beside him. Oh, not bad at all. Ariel sounded pleased. I knew my instincts weren't wrong. The man with the center-parted hair asked, Bella, you weren't holding back just now, right? Didn't Ariel tell you to go easy? Another man, this one bearded, cut in with a tone of accusation. Your form was flawless. But you let go of your sword way too easily. That wasn't natural. The name struck a chord in Gray. He glanced over. Bella. So it really is Bella Albright. Looking at her now, she didn't seem much different from her future self. A mage, he thought. Ariel rolled her eyes, clearly unimpressed. Are you too seriously doubting this? If you can't even recognize that much, maybe it's time to quit being professors. The center-parted man stammered, and no, we were just joking. Ariel scoffed. Too bad, I have to admit, I'm impressed. Gray was still confused. Professor, what are you guys even doing? Ariel beamed. We were betting on whether you could block Bella's surprise attack. Thanks to you, I just won big. She tossed something to Gray. He instinctively caught it and opened his hand, eyes widening. Gold coins. That's basically a fortune. Finally, the bearded professor gave in. All right, I'll admit it. You were right. He'd been watching the duel closely. From the way he moved, it looked like he wasn't using his dominant hand. The bearded man analyzed further. It might be due to an injury. Gray winced and clutched his arm. They're right. The other professor nodded. Yeah, I agree. That's not just a surface-level injury. It's something deeper. Gray couldn't believe it. They can tell all that just by watching. The bearded man replied bluntly, if we couldn't, we wouldn't be professors here, would we? The man with the center part added, seems like Professor Ariel already knew about it during the entrance exam. Ariel's tone turned cold. If you get it now, then leave. That student is mine. I'm not handing him over. The two professors turned to go. The man with the parted hair offered one last comment. We acknowledge his potential at least for now. As the bearded man passed, his sharp eyes locked onto Gray. But if that injury doesn't heal, it means he won't meet the Academy's standards. Remember that. Gray's eyes darkened, wary and guarded. Now only Professor Ariel, Bella and Gray remained in the room. Ariel was the first to speak. Now that the annoying ones are gone, she said, her demeanor shifting into something more mysterious, let's talk magic. She began by asking about Gray's background. I heard you used ultra-compressed ether in Professor Carlos's class? Gray, having no intention of hiding the truth, replied. So you already know. Ariel recounted. He came straight to my office and asked me to transfer you to the magic department. Naturally, I refused. She paused for a moment before continuing. To me then, she revealed her other eye, which glowed like a star. You're more suited for swordsmanship than magic. It was the first time Gray had ever seen her fully open both eyes, and he couldn't hide his surprise. Ariel elaborated further. At the very least, you don't seem like someone skilled at compressing mana. There aren't even any traces of training left on you. Gray took mental note of that. Just from her gaze she can tell that much. I better not try to lie to her. He spoke honestly, you're right. Ariel, clearly curious, pressed on. Can I ask what trick you used? I promise not to tell anyone. I'll even reward you. She glanced toward Bella, almost as if they shared some secret. I really need to know because of her. Gray instinctively started to reply, but caught himself just in time. That was close, he thought with relief. Because of the mage? No, I mean because of Bella. He'd nearly let the word mage slip. Ariel, noting the distressed expression on Bella's face, offered a quiet confirmation. That's right. Even though she's a genius when it comes to magical theory, her practical skills still need work. Her tone grew troubled. I don't know why, but she can't perform ether compression well. That's why she's unable to produce ultra-compressed ether. Gray studied Bella intently, recalling bits and pieces he'd learned about her. So that's it. I did hear Bella Albright is something of a late bloomer. Ariel then shifted the topic back to Gray. But according to Professor Carlos, when you used ultra-compressed ether, it didn't look like you were compressing it at all. If there really is a way to use ultra-compressed ether without compressing it yourself, she trailed off and glanced at Bella, then she wouldn't have to be transferred to Professor Bradley. Bella's expression visibly darkened. Gray froze. Professor Bradley, wait, do you mean Professor Variant Bradley? Yes, Ariel confirmed. Sounds like you know him. Gray's face went pale with horror. Of course I do, he thought, panicked. He's infamous. His mind reeled with memories of bodies piled at Bradley's feet, of brutal human experiments, of countless lives lost. Entire towns scorched to ash by his magical experiments. Catastrophes that had killed dozens. To Gray, Bradley wasn't just a professor, he was a mass murderer. The most notorious magical criminal in recorded history. And he hasn't even been caught yet. Ariel's voice trembled slightly. If she still can't produce ultra-compressed ether by the end of the year, she'll be transferred to him and operated on. Gray's dread spiked. He couldn't stay quiet. Wait, hold on. That's not okay. That's not okay at all. Ariel grimly acknowledged the cruel reality. I know. They'll say it's to enhance magical aptitude, but the truth is it's just human experimentation. She looked away, pain in her eyes. I've seen the corpses, their eyes still wide open even in death. The truth hasn't come out yet, but there are rumors many died, and others were permanently ruined. After a long silence, Bella finally spoke up. Yes, it's dangerous and terrifying. But if I can't use compressed ether, I'll be expelled by the end of the year. Ariel's voice was resolute, laced with hatred for that perverted Bradley. Honestly, I'd rather see you drop out than let that creep lay a hand on you. Gray remained quiet for a while. Deep in thought. The magic he knew was knowledge that didn't exist in this era, revealing it could alter the course of history. Bella was trembling, visibly shaken. Gray's eyes were dark and intense, as if cursing the very world. The future he spoke of was one where the world was destroyed by the purifier, where he himself was powerless, where warriors perished in an instant. Was that the future he truly envisioned? His expression softened. No, of course not. If that bleak future could be changed, it would only be for the better. He set down his teacup with resolve. I understand now. I'll teach you. A dark sphere of magic suddenly appeared in his palm. Outside the arena's training grounds, everyone stood in silence, eyes fixed on the board as Gray explained the fundamentals of magic. He was sincere. And that's all I know about magic. As promised, please don't tell anyone I taught you this. Ariel answered firmly, you have my word. Bella added, we signed a magical contract, remember? Breaking it means death. With both parties committed, Gray Lee could breathe easy. So, after everything I've explained, what do you think? Ariel, though an excellent professor, was clearly overwhelmed. Just the part about OD blew my mind. But your magical theories go even beyond that. Bella, on the other hand, absorbed it all with ease. Concise and precise, she commented, it felt like I just attended a once-in-a-century magic lecture. She was genuinely intrigued by Gray's knowledge and praised him sincerely. Just listening to you could push magical history ahead by 100 years. Gray was grateful for the praise but didn't let it go to his head. Though this was material from his lectures 10 years in the future, to people of this era, it probably did seem a century ahead. Still, Ariel wasn't entirely convinced. There's a lot I can't assess right away. Do you really believe what he said is true? Bella had complete faith in Gray Lee. It's highly likely his theory is valid. Nothing contradicts current magical understanding, and the fast way to confirm it is through experimentation, which is why we're here. Bella looked at Gray with eager anticipation. If what you've said is true, Gray, then this spell should work. She set down a piece of paper and stepped forward, following the theory. Raising her staff, she began forming a magic circle. This spell is supposed to draw out my full power. Gray hesitated, trying to recall something. Full power. If he remembered correctly, Bella Albright's full strength was said to be enough to burn an entire city to ashes. In an instant, the magic circle expanded dramatically, engulfing the area. Bella had a history of losing control when channeling large amounts of mana. She still looked confused, unaware of what was happening. Before Gray could stop her, his body began to fade. Wait, he tried to call out. From the arena's heart, an explosive surge of mana erupted like a volcanic blast. Blinding light radiated everywhere, the overwhelming residue of power twisting Gray Lee's face into an expression that was both pitiful and almost comical. Wait a second. Immediately, a towering column of flame shot straight up into the sky. Gray Lee hastily stretched his hands out in front of him, trying to shield himself from the scorching gust of heat blasting from Bella Albright. Squinting at the pillar of fire, terror gripped him. The sheer force of it was utterly overwhelming. He recalled how, moments ago, the flames had spread rapidly, almost reaching him. Had she not controlled her magic even a fraction of a second sooner, he would have been dead. But thanks to her, the fire had been reversed and reined in. Safely kept away from him, it had quite literally saved his life. Across from him, Bella Albright lifted her magic staff high, a triumphant smile lighting up her face as she announced, I did it, I managed to control it. The flames blazed fiercely, yet moved with precise order, swirling elegantly around a single corner of space. Gradually, they spun and converged, forming a massive, ethereal dragon of red fire that soared through the air. Bella's eyes sparkled with delight as she gazed upward at the spell she had conjured. Truly, it was exhilarating. But suddenly, she withdrew the flames, her tone light and plaintive, muttering, but. Moments later, her eyes fluttered shut. And her voice faded on the wind, I am out of ether. She collapsed face first onto the ground, utterly still. The sight made Gray Lee's heart leap with fear. He rushed forward, lifting her head in his hands and calling out anxiously, Bella, standing calmly behind him. Ariel spoke with a composed tone, stay calm. She reassured him seriously, explaining that Bella had merely fainted from running out of ether. Just let her rest, she said. Observing Bella's serene, peaceful expression as she slept, Gray Lee's tension eased, and he smiled in relief. Ariel glanced up at the remaining sparks of fire and could not hide her astonishment, exclaiming, "Even so, it is incredible. I did not expect she could create a spell of that scale in such a short time." Quietly, Bella responded, "The skill is not mine, it is the theory. Now I can easily generate super-condensed ether." Gray Lee, feeling powerless, thought to himself, "But that is your theory. Even asleep, she can respond." Ariel paid little attention to Bella's soft comment, instead letting out a relieved sigh. "She has managed to create super-condensed ether. There is no need for surgery anymore. I will inform Bradley to cancel the procedure." Reflecting on Bella's earlier mastery of the spell, Ariel felt her own anxiety melt away. She was genuinely relieved that the risky operation could be avoided, but even more so that Bella had not lost her ability to control magic. However, Gray Lee noticed something peculiar in Ariel's words. He shot her a questioning glance. Her ability to control magic. "You are certain?" Ariel's expression turned cold and serious. "Yes," she confirmed firmly. She explained that while Bradley's surgery could boost magical output, it came at the cost of precise control. The method of operation was still a secret, but it was rumored to forcibly break natural limits. Gray Lee raised a hand to his chin. A realization dawning on him. So that is why mages in the previous world could not control their immense magical power. The surgery was the reason. Ariel smiled, satisfied, and summoned a contract on a sheet of paper. Thanks to him, Bella could now create super-condensed ether, fulfilling the conditions of their agreement. Holding the paper before her, she said seriously, "Now it is my turn to perform my part." First, she looked down at Gray Lee's arm. "I want to use magic on your arm." Immediately, streams of mystical blue energy and vibrant butterflies appeared from her hands. Ariel brought her hand close to the back of his hand, applying her magic. In an instant, the entire space was bathed in a soft blue glow, teeming with fluttering butterflies, all emanating from the point where their hands met. After a while, Ariel stopped, and the beautiful, otherworldly phenomenon slowly dissipated. She casually asked, "How's it feeling? Try moving your hand, clench and release." Gray Lee's eyes widened in astonishment. I can move it," he exclaimed. A broad smile of joy spread across his face as he expressed his gratitude. "Thank you so much, Professor." But then doubt crept into him, and he asked, "But even magical recovery potions could not fix this. So how?" Upon hearing this, Ariel's expression turned confidently arrogant as she replied, "Don't compare my nerve repair magic to ordinary recovery potions." Folding her arms with a serious air, she asked, "But can it move like it used to? Try swinging your sword and see." Without hesitation, he nodded. Gray Lee stepped back a short distance and drew his sword, swinging it in a broad horizontal arc in front of him. He immediately felt something unusual in the motion. A subtle discrepancy in the way his arm moved, prompting him to scrutinize the hand gripping the sword. Moments later, he began cutting through the air with sharp, precise swings. He frowned in frustration, pausing briefly to reflect. Finally, he stopped and looked at his hand, a troubled frown on his face. "It does not feel as flexible as before," he admitted. Ariel was unsurprised. "Just as I thought," she said, resting a hand on her forehead in resignation. "I can heal the nerves, but my magic can't mend the wounds within your soul." Gray Lee blinked in confusion. "The wounds in my soul," he repeated. Ariel glanced at him with seriousness, confirming, "Yes. You heard me right." She placed her hand over her chest and continued. "Although current magical theory has not yet proven the existence of the soul, I believe it is real." Raising her hand to cover one eye, she added, "After all." When she removed her hand, a strange pattern shimmered in her pupil, visible only through that eye. Through it, she could see a radiant cluster of light inside Gray Lee, beams of energy slowly converging around it. "Even now," she explained, "your soul is gradually recovering. As long as you do not overexert yourself, it will heal on its own over time." Gray Lee stared in disbelief at his hand, repeating, "Don't overexert my body." Then he lifted his gaze to her, seeking clarification. "So, I should not train too hard?" Unexpectedly, Ariel shook her head. "Not at all. You can still train as usual." She rested her chin thoughtfully. "But I am curious what kind of sword technique could actually harm the soul like that." Gray Lee could only force a wry smile, unable to respond. Then she uttered something that left him stunned, but it made sense. A sword technique that channels the soul to wield the blade did exist. Ariel's expression grew mysterious as she mentioned a name. Amy White. You know her, do not you? Gray Lee's eyes widened in fear. Instantly, the face of Amy White from his previous life flashed through his mind. Why would she bring up the Sword Saint here, in this time? There is no reason we should even know each other now. Seeing his unusual reaction, Ariel's curiosity was piqued. Wait, did I say something wrong? The way you wield your sword looks like you learned it from Amy. She hesitated, analyzing further. But thinking carefully, there is a slight difference. The person who taught you swordsmanship seems even more skilled than Amy herself. She met his eyes with confidence. Though, in just a few years, Amy will also reach that level. Gray Lee felt a cold sweat run down his spine at her perceptiveness. She knows about that too. He quickly covered the topic, brushing off the skill details. I learned swordsmanship at the dojo back home, he said, mentally scrambling to change the subject before he accidentally revealed too much. He hurriedly asked, but is it really possible for a sword technique to damage the soul? Just as Gray Lee hoped, Ariel answered confidently, not at all. At least, not any ordinary sword technique. She planted her hands firmly on her hips and explained, from the very beginning, nothing ordinary could cut down a mighty ogre general with a single strike, not to mention the other ogres and the surrounding trees. Her words brought back the memory of that moment his sword strike had cut down a whole group of goblins, saving a dire situation. So she had already known. And because of that, Ariel had engaged in a kind of joyful gamble. Of course, she admitted with a hint of satisfaction, thanks to you, I nearly won the bet. Then she returned to her serious demeanor. I examined the scene and the remaining ruins. It was truly impressive. Even the most sophisticated dismemberment spells could not have achieved that. She pointed cautiously at Gray Lee, probing carefully, that mysterious power inside you. You used it, did not you? Surprised, he asked, you can see it, Professor. Her tone was confident. Of course I can. Ariel's eye emitted a faint, ethereal glow, lending her words an added air of mystery. I can see that power leaking through the chained door. Gray Lee was stunned into silence. He thought of the intricately patterned door bound with chains, the heavy sense of gravity pressing on him again. The chained door. His gaze shifted to the woman before him, and all he felt now was awe and respect. He could not have guessed this. She had truly seen it. Without paying attention to his inner turmoil, Ariel revealed another piece of news. Honestly, I have also encountered a power similar to yours. I do not think it is exactly the same, but the feeling is unmistakably alike. Gray Lee's brow furrowed in curiosity. A similar power. So there is someone else with abilities like mine. She nodded solemnly. Yes, but I am not even sure if they are human. Then Ariel spoke a name that made Gray Lee's eyes widen in terror. The Purifiers, they are called that. Seeing his reaction, she confirmed, so you have heard of them before, have not you? A vision of something resembling a human, yet not human, flashed in Gray Lee's mind. Ariel confirmed everything without hesitation, pointing directly at him. So you have heard of it already. Honestly, I did not think it was so widely known. Meanwhile, Bella Albright remained blissfully unaware, still sleeping peacefully. Ariel's thoughts drifted to the knowledge on the board earlier, and she speculated silently. But considering that you know about that magic theory concerning the future, I suppose it is not all that surprising. Gray Lee felt embarrassed and scratched his head, unwilling to admit it. So it really is knowledge from the future, even though no one has discovered that part yet. Ariel crossed her arms, her tone serious and probing. How much do you know about the Purifier? Gray Lee let his hands drop, avoiding her gaze, answering vaguely, I only know that it is an extremely dangerous threat to humanity. Recalling the bleak future he had witnessed, he added gravely, we have to stop him from appearing before it is too late. If not, we must destroy him at any cost. Ariel pondered, resting her chin on her hand. Perhaps that is a bit extreme, but I agree. He really is dangerous. Even so, Balian Bradley still seems determined to continue his experiments. Gray Lee frowned in confusion. Balian, what does he have to do with this? This time, Ariel's expression shifted to one of mild surprise. You are still asking? Then, calm and deliberate, she revealed the shocking truth. The Purifier is the entity he is trying to summon. Gray Lee's eyes widened in horror. The Purifier was created by humans, no one's ever said that before. He rested his chin in thought, suspicious. But the academy, in the previous timeline. He remembered the timely actions that had taken them directly to where the purifier appeared, and his doubts deepened. It is as if they knew exactly where it would show up. Putting the pieces together, he felt a surge of terror. Gray Lee spun around, disbelief flooding his mind. Don't tell me. He stared at the intricately designed academy building before him. A growing sense of dread pressing down. The academy has been involved in the summoning from the very beginning. Immediately, he turned back to Ariel, tense. That experiment. It has to be stopped immediately. She nodded seriously in agreement. Absolutely. Ariel folded her arms reluctantly and explained, the problem is that the lead researcher is a professor, like me. I do not have the authority to close the lab or halt his experiments. I pushed my superiors to cancel it, but they did not listen. Gray Lee asked sharply, who exactly are your superiors? She shook her head apologetically. I am sorry, I do not have the authority to reveal that. The point is, without orders from above, no one can force the experiment to stop. Gray Lee closed his eyes, feeling completely powerless. Not even the name of the head of the academy. Turns out the leadership here is more complicated than I imagined. Suddenly, an idea struck him, and he opened his eyes, deep in thought. But if that professor is a criminal, would not that change everything? As far as he knew, in the future, the man had conducted human experiments. In the previous world, Balian's illegal experiments had killed tens of thousands, and Gray Lee even knew where the experiments had taken place. Immediately, he looked Ariel squarely in the eyes and said bluntly, you know where he conducted those magical experiments. We could catch him right at the scene. Before he could finish, she interrupted sharply. Sorry, but that would not work either. Confused, he asked, why not? Calmly, she explained, infiltrating a professor's research facility within the academy without proper authorization is a serious crime. Ariel's expression turned cold, warning him, without concrete evidence, we would be imprisoned ourselves. Or, are you suggesting there is already proof of his crimes? Gray Lee glanced away uneasily, unsure of how to respond. Seeing this, she decided to drop the topic. Otherwise, this matter will have to be put aside for now. Gray Lee clenched his fists in frustration. So even though she knew how dangerous it was, she was powerless. Out loud, he replied grumpily. Understood. Sensing his mood, Ariel shifted the conversation. More importantly, let us talk about your power. Do you want to learn how to control it? Her words struck a chord deep within Gray Lee. He immediately put aside his lingering thoughts and looked at her in astonishment. He quickly asked, is that possible? She smiled, a hint of pride in her expression. There is a very skilled professor at the academy who handles unknown abilities exceptionally well. Ariel glanced at him before slowly speaking the name. His name is Heathcote Longfellow. Gray Lee's eyes widened in disbelief. Heathcote Longfellow, the one who trained the Sword Saint. She spoke seriously, giving him a firm reminder. I think he will be intrigued by you. I will arrange for you to start private training with him starting tomorrow. Gray Lee's heart soared. Thank you, he said, inwardly feeling a rush of luck. The reason he came to the academy was to master this power. And now he had a clear lead. His spirits were jubilant, and the afternoon sunlight streaming over the training grounds felt like a sign of a promising new beginning. The next day, a man sped through the forest like a streak of lightning. Behind him, Gray Lee panted heavily, sweat pouring down his face, distracted by his own thoughts. I am about to have private lessons with Heathcote Longfellow. But he pushed himself to keep up with Heathcote, groaning in frustration. Why do we have to run like this? They were currently in the forest beside the academy's instructional buildings. As they ran, Heathcote suddenly turned his head sharply and barked. Your mind is wandering, I can feel it. If there is any space left for stray thoughts, speed up, run until your body is utterly exhausted. Heathcote maintained his own fast pace, speaking with strict authority. Listen carefully, only when you burn every last drop of your physical stamina will your soul's power awaken. As long as there is a shred of energy left, I will not let you touch the sword. Understood. Gray Lee responded quickly, yes, sir. Running, he tried to convince himself, if this is Heathcote's training, there must be a purpose behind it. But the matter of Balian Bradley and his summoning experiments gnawed at him. A constant worry. While Gray Lee ran in circles in the forest, Balian was still conducting the purifier summoning. Before he could dwell further, Heathkit suddenly increased his speed. Grey gritted his teeth and pushed to keep up, though his mind wavered. Should I really be doing this right now? A week later, Grey returned to Ariel's room. She sat behind her desk, curiosity gleaming in her eyes. So a week of training has passed. How's it going with Heathkit? He scratched his head, hesitant to explain. Actually, it is mostly running. We only did a little sword practice at the end, but I do feel a bit stronger. Hearing this, Ariel laughed softly. That sounds exactly like him. Suddenly, someone entered through the door. Excuse me. Someone handed Ariel a letter. Professor Ariel, there is a letter for you. She reached out and accepted it, saying politely, "Oh, thank you." Without delay, she opened it and began reading. Suddenly, her eyes widened in disbelief. Seeing this, Grey's concern immediately flared. What is it? He took the letter from her hands and read it himself. As he absorbed the contents, a wave of fear and anger surged through him. On the page, it read, "To the esteemed Professor Ariel. We have received reports that Bella Albright has successfully created super-compressed ether, meaning she truly possesses a power equivalent to it. However, upon inspection, it is clear she has not fully compressed it, and thus her new ability cannot yet be recognized as true super-compressed ether. The contract remains in effect, and the campaign will proceed as planned." Balian Bradley. Grey could no longer contain his rage. He shouted, cursing in sheer frustration. Ariel's expression was grave. It seems Bradley is still determined to force her into the surgery, even though she may not need it anymore. He looked at her, anxious. She can't refuse. Ariel shook her head, helpless. There is nothing she can do, the contract is too strict. She clenched her fingers and spoke each word with emphasis. Unless Bradley himself cancels it, Bella can either choose exile or undergo the surgery. Grey could not believe it. No, he murmured, stunned. Suddenly, Ariel slammed her hand on the desk. Grey, I need your help. She looked at him with a serious, earnest gaze. Show me where Bradley's laboratory is. If we expose his crimes, the contract will become invalid. Grey stared at her in astonishment, speechless for a moment. Then, despite the tension, he could not suppress a smile. He exhaled sharply, teasing her lightly. Isn't this dangerous without evidence? Ariel, recalling her own words from before, replied calmly, we will find the evidence. I am placing my trust in you. Her sharp gaze locked onto him. No, perhaps I trusted you from the very beginning, her eyes seemed to say. Ariel expressed her resolve seriously. You have been truthful this whole time. I just needed a moment to admit it. Grey could only remain silent, listening attentively. She stepped closer to him and made her request. Guide me there, Grey. Then, with a solemn expression, she declared, we will expose his crimes together. Grey's expression turned a touch more serious, and he said, his lab is up in the mountains near the village of Toruel. At that, Professor Ariel's face darkened slightly as she replied, Toruel, I remember he does have an academy-approved lab there. Hearing that from the professor startled Grey even more. He was doing illegal experiments inside an officially sanctioned lab. The red-haired woman snapped her head around and said, where else would be more convenient for illicit work? Even if he stays there a long time, nobody would suspect a thing. Professors do not poke around one another's labs. Still, if we can find concrete proof of his crimes, no one will fault us for breaking in. Right then there was a knock at the door and a voice called, it is me, Bella. Ariel waved her in, come on in. Bella entered, looking anxious. She pulled a letter from her pocket and said solemnly, Professor, I received this. Before she could finish, Ariel gently took the letter from the blue-haired girl's hands and replied, reassuringly, do not worry, I will take care of it. The seriousness in Ariel's gaze made Bella flustered. She asked, you mean you are going to confront Varian for my sake, by yourself? The professor broke into a confident smile. I can handle it on my own. Seeing this, Bella looked toward Grey with a worried glance. Grey, catching the look, said, wait please, I will go with you. The blue-haired girl immediately chimed in, me too, this is my business as well. Seeing both of her students eager to come, the professor covered her face with a sigh and warned, hold on. He is a professor at the academy and a dangerous one at that. He has conducted risky human experiments before. If he captures either of you, who knows what he will do? I can't let you put yourselves in that kind of danger. Gray understood that completely, but he stepped forward another step and argued, exactly, that is why it is even more dangerous for you to go alone. If I use the same power that took down that general, I can help you. Besides, if you disappear and I am a direct admit student, I will be expelled. Please let us decide our own fate. They spoke with steady conviction, faces set. After a tense pause and an exchange of glances, Professor Ariel relented. It looks like even if I forbid it, you two will come anyway. Fine. But you must promise me one thing, whatever happens, your safety comes first. Understood. Her voice was dead serious, no argument allowed. Both students nodded and answered in unison. Yes, madam. Time passed quickly, and the three of them made their way to the Bradley laboratory. Standing before the huge building, Bella was the first to speak up. He is really doing illegal experiments here. Professor Ariel nodded. Yes. We need to gather proof, right? She looked to Gray as she said it, and Gray did not make her wait. Yes. This is definitely the place, he replied. Bella still looked worried despite how far they would come. If you say so, I trust you, but can we collect evidence without getting into trouble? She asked. Ariel laughed, bright and sharp. Varian is at the Law Guild conference right now, so he is not here. The main entrance is probably trapped, so we will have to blow through a side wall. The red-haired professor's plan made Bella murmur anxiously, is that really okay? Ariel's face filled with confident assurance. Breaking into an academy-approved lab is already a crime, so one more sin won't make things worse. If you change your mind, you can turn back now. At those words, Bella tightened her grip on her staff and answered with firm resolve, I am coming. But are you really sure? You are risking all this for someone like me. Before Bella finished, Gray cut in, countering, you are wrong. Stopping his experiments is for the whole world. If we do not, countless people will die. No, he will sacrifice the world. The intensity in Gray's voice left him visibly strained. Bella went slack-faced and murmured, what? Professor Ariel stepped in to steady things. What Gray said might sound extreme, but I agree he must be stopped. Do not worry so much. We won't risk our lives just for you, Bella. Now move. With that, the three of them surged forward like a gust of wind. As they ran, Ariel channeled magic. Bolts of red light streaked from her hands and slammed into the concrete wall before them, producing a concussive blast. Dust and rubble filled the air. Gray gave an embarrassed little smile and thought to himself, wow, way dramatic. Putting that aside, the trio slipped through the hole in the wall and hurried into the lab. The sight that met them turned Gray's expression grave. What is this? He gasped. They stood facing row upon row of cells streaked with blackened blood. In some of the chambers, a few people still remained, their bodies soaked in blood from whatever experiments had been performed on them. By that point, they did not even need to hunt for proof anymore. Ariel spoke up, it looks like we do not even have to search for evidence. Bella scanned the room anxiously and said, there is just too much. The professor nodded in agreement. A single glance is enough. I can already see 14 different forbidden rites. That is a heinous crime on its own, not to mention the illegal human experimentation. As she spoke, all three of them were suddenly drawn to something else. Not far away, a strange magic array caught their attention. What is that? It looks like some sort of altar. What do we do? Bella asked, worry in her voice. The plan was to take the evidence and leave, but should we try to rescue the people locked up in there? Gray cut her off. We can't stay here long. If we delay, Varian might. Before he could finish, a surprised voice behind them called out, what are you doing? The sound made Gray snap his attention to the darkened corridor. A shadow stepped forward and said, did you call for me? Ariel, who seemed to recognize the newcomer, asked lazily, how was your conference, Varian? At the name Varian, Gray drew his sword and assumed a fighting stance, bewildered that the man was here. Varian, however, did not seem bothered and began to explain, I sent a proxy to that meeting. I have important experiments to run here. I just acquired some fresh materials. I had to use them while they are still viable. But I will have to alter my plans. He adjusted his spectacles as he spoke. An oppressive aura radiated from him, and for a moment all three, including Gray, felt their faces change. Varian continued, in an almost jaunty tone, besides, I prefer materials that show magical potential beyond the norm. I do not know how you learned about me, but I am sure you did not tell anyone you were coming here, right? If you simply vanish, no one will suspect me. He smiled then, a thin, cunning smile, as if he already had the upper hand over the three of them. Professor Ariel's voice rang out sharply in challenge. Ingredients, do not tell me you mean to use us as lab rats. Her suspicion was dead on. Varian made no attempt to deny it. He simply answered with chilling calm, relax. Your sacrifice will push the limits of magic forward. That is why I can't let you walk away alive. You will serve as the finest materials I could ask for. He followed with a sly, crooked smile. But before he could utter another word, a blazing fireball surged from the opposite side, heat searing through the air as it shot straight toward him. Varian's expression darkened slightly just before the explosion shook the dim corridor. The one who had launched the spell was none other than Bella. Her stance taut with anger, it was obvious she had been waiting for her chance to strike back at this wretched professor. Unfortunately, the spell had little effect. When the smoke cleared, Ariel and Bella's eyes widened in shock. Varian stood there calmly brushing dust from his coat, utterly unharmed. He had deployed a magical barrier in the nick of time. Not only that, he had the audacity to smirk and offer praise. Splendid, truly splendid. Ariel's divine eyes are still as sharp as ever. To think that a special student like you would possess such unique talent. Perhaps I should pay closer attention to recruits chosen by the Holy Eye. His tone shifted, sneering as he turned his attention to Bella. I can't say I am unimpressed by your little spell, but a student attempting to assassinate her professor. Bella shot back bitterly, her voice laced with regret. Better that than letting myself be killed. Though, I have clearly missed that chance. From Ariel's perspective, her priority was her student's safety, not a reckless fight. She interjected firmly, we should withdraw immediately. We have all the evidence we need. Bella, the blue-haired mage, nodded quickly. The academy can handle the rest. But Varian, of course, had no intention of letting them escape so easily. His cold voice echoed down the hall, you think you can leave here unharmed? With a flick of his hand, he unleashed a surge of purple-black energy that streaked toward Bella like lightning. In that critical instant, Ariel hurled herself forward, conjuring a golden shield of magic to block the blast. Professor! Bella cried out in alarm from behind her. Varian's smirk widened as his spell ground against the shield. Pointless, this is one of my finest results, devouring flame. It feeds on defensive magic, burning it down and turning it into fuel. In theory, it cannot be blocked. The only drawback is the expense of creating it. Just as he said, Ariel's golden barrier cracked almost instantly under the onslaught, fractures spider webbing across its surface before shattering into fragments. With no other choice, Ariel drew upon the power of her holy eye, conjuring a second barrier, this one a gleaming blue directly behind the first. It managed to catch the brunt of Varian's strike the moment the golden shield collapsed. Yet the respite was short-lived. Fissures spread rapidly across the blue defense as well, the sound of splintering magic filling the corridor. Taking advantage of that brief pause, the professor barked a command, Bella, take the grimoire of memory and get out of here. Bring it to Heathkit, he will know what to do when he sees it. She handed Bella a small cube, placing it gently into the girl's palm. But Bella was not about to abandon her mentor. She slammed her staff into the ground and conjured a hemispherical barrier that enveloped them all. Ariel, panicked, shouted, what are you doing? Run now. Bella's voice was steady and resolute as she answered, Professor, your shield is failing. Let me hold it for a moment. Ariel only grew angrier. Did not we promise each other before we came, if anything goes wrong, you must put your life first. Varian's magic is not natural, defensive spells simply can't block it. I will buy us time, but... Before Ariel could finish, her own defensive barrier shattered into shards. For a heartbeat she looked terrified. Oddly, Bella remained calm. It is okay, she said, and the next instant Varian's assault slammed into the dome Bella had raised. The impact detonated inside the bubble with a deafening boom, yet Varian's blast made no further progress. Bella began to explain with cool confidence, this spell is not that powerful in itself. It only needs a slightly different kind of defensive counter. Varian's composure cracked. Impossible. The theory behind devouring flame is known only to us. How would you know it? He shouted. Bella's reply was crisp, almost mocking. Someone taught me a new theoretical approach recently. With it, this spell is trivial to counter. Varian's face went white with fury. He bellowed like a rabid beast. Who taught you? Name the traitor. Surrender and I will grant you a quick death. Bella's tone turned teasing. You want a name? It is a secret, though I will say this. He is a student from the Sword Knight division. The veins bulged at Varian's temples. He had clearly reached a boiling point. So you refuse to answer seriously, then, fine, prepare to be burned alive. With that, he produced a pink crystal from somewhere and crushed it in his palm. Empowered by the crystal, he unleashed a swarm of macabre skulls that coalesced into the shape of a monstrous head and lunged at the group, swallowing them in a tide of dark magic. From behind the barrier, Ariel wiped sweat from her brow and asked anxiously, Bella, are you holding up? Bella answered, I am okay, the shield will hold. But even as she spoke, her voice faltered. Varian, sensing her exhaustion, cut in coldly, you won't have much mana left, will you? With what you have left, you can maybe hold out for a minute if you are lucky. Turning back to Bella, she quickly cried out to her professor, Professor, attack him now, I will handle the defense. Hearing that, her professor gave a sharp nod of understanding. All right. With that, she activated her holy eye, silently observing the battlefield ahead. In moments, she spotted a flaw in Varian's spellwork. That thin flame there. I can push my mana outside the barrier. Acting immediately, without hesitation, the red-haired professor extended her hand forward and poured her own magic into it, condensing it into a stream of lightning that shot straight at Varian. But before the attack could even reach him, it unraveled and vanished midair as if swallowed whole. Seeing this, Professor Varian let out a contemptuous laugh. Trying to strike back, you can't even touch me. Ariel's expression tightened. She had no idea what to attempt next. At the same time, Gray was already analyzing. If I remember correctly, Professor Ariel's offensive magic is among the weakest of all the professors, and with the nature of these flames, they will naturally absorb her spells. Before he could think further, Bella's weak voice broke through. What do we do now? My energy's almost gone. Her body trembled uncontrollably, and Ariel, seeing her, spoke bitterly. That is why I told you should have run while you had the chance. Gray stepped forward, his voice steady. Leave it to me. Those words lit a spark of hope in the group. Bella immediately asked, Gray, do you have a plan? Your sword can't even reach him from here. Gray answered softly, it will be fine. I can do it. Ariel instantly understood what he intended and warned, are you sure? Using that power again could kill you. Even if you survive, the arm you wield it with may never recover. At that, Gray's lips curved into a faint smile. Dying alone is better than all three of us dying together. Do not you agree? From Varian's perspective, just then, he suddenly caught a blinding flash of light breaking through his magic. In the next instant, impossibly, Gray had burst out from within the very flames themselves. Before Varian could even process what had happened, the weapon in his hand and the very flames he commanded were severed cleanly in two. Gray's eyes remained calm, as though he had merely sliced through a block of butter. Right after Gray's blade sliced through the air, the young mage Ariel stood frozen, her expression utterly blank in disbelief. She was not the only one, even Professor Ariel herself could not hide the astonishment in her eyes. Gazing at Varian's body, now cleanly split apart, she muttered in awe, this is the first time I have seen it in person. But this is overwhelming. Before anyone could even process what had just happened, the entire prison began to shake violently. Cracks spider-webbed across the ceiling, and chunks of rock and debris rained down. The roof is collapsing, someone shouted. But such minor tremors were nothing for their red-haired professor. Without hesitation, she stepped forward, unleashing her magic to halt the collapse. From beneath her feet, waves of pink light rippled outward, spreading through the chamber. Beams of radiant energy shot through the falling rubble, freezing every stone midair. Ariel scanned the results of her spell, then sighed softly. Good heavens! This is beyond anything I anticipated. Turning toward her student, her tone grew anxious. But what about you, your body, are you all right? Gray, still catching his breath, tossed his sword aside. He looked down at his trembling hand and said, my arm hurts. Feels kind of numb, too. But I can still move it. As he picked his sword back up, the professor's expression eased. Seeing that her student was still standing, she nodded with satisfaction. It seems your training is finally paying off. Gray sheathed his sword and admitted, "I guess so." But inside, he reminded himself silently, if I were still the same kid from the village, I would have passed out for days. When I woke up, I probably would not even be able to lift my arm. Now, it only hurt a little was not that progress. The endless days of grueling training had been worth it after all. Tightening his fist, Gray felt a spark of pride. Meanwhile, Professor Ariel observed quietly without interrupting. After a few seconds, she stepped closer and spoke in a soft, regretful tone. "Thanks to you, we are still alive, but I am sorry I made you use that power." Gray shook his head firmly. "Please do not apologize. I was the one who insisted on stopping Varian from the start." Before he could say anything else, the beautiful professor offered a word of caution. "Thank you. But if you can, refrain from using that power again at least for a while. Otherwise, the damage to your body might never heal." Her face was filled with genuine worry. Gray, equally unsettled, bit his lip and nodded. "I understand." The other mage, Bella, who had been watching the exchange in confusion, finally spoke up. Sorry to interrupt, but that just now was that magic, I could not sense any ether at all." Explaining that kind of power as ordinary magic was impossible. Professor Ariel knew that, and she could not allow her student to dig any deeper. She cut in swiftly, her tone serious, "I am sorry, but I must ask you not to question this further and not to tell anyone what you saw today." Bella blinked, clearly flustered. "Why not, Professor?" Ariel did not waste time explaining. Her expression hardened, and her voice turned cold. "If you can't promise me that, I will have to erase your memory." As she said this, her magic flared faintly around her hands, a clear warning that she was ready to act. The young mage paled and quickly raised her hands in surrender. "I understand, then. Let us make a magical contract." "Yes," Ariel replied with a nod as she summoned a glowing magical contract that hovered in the air before them. In just a few moments, both of them had signed it. Once everything was settled, Gray finally spoke up. "So, what now? I am worried about these experiments too, but first, I think we should help these people. It looks like they were just put to sleep with magic." As he said that, his eyes scanned the unconscious prisoners lying inside the dimly lit cells. Ariel did not oppose his idea, though she added her own thought. "This area is no longer dangerous, but we should still transfer them to the Academy's medical ward to be safe." With that, she snapped her fingers, and the entire prison chamber filled with a soft golden light. Each prisoner's body became wrapped in a shimmering halo. Once she was done, the professor explained her action. "I have set up a protective barrier around them to prevent any further harm. Now, let us continue investigating deeper inside. This place is insane. Illegal experiments everywhere, almost all of them involving human cells as catalysts to amplify magical power. I can't detect any signal related to the purifier. Maybe it is located at another facility." Her tone was cold and analytical, but Gray's thoughts were elsewhere. His gaze drifted over the room as a heavy sense of déjà vu crept in. "So this is it," he murmured inwardly. "This is the place where that incident happened. The one that killed so many people in my past life. But could creating a simple magical catalyst really cause such a massive disaster?" Then, suddenly, a horrifying thought struck him. Wait a second, was not the thing that killed everyone the poisonous miasma that seeped out from underground? The realization made him stop in his tracks. Ariel, walking a few paces ahead, noticed his change in demeanor and turned back toward him. "What is wrong?" she asked. Gray's mind raced as he voiced his suspicion. "It might be underground. There could be a hidden passage or something." Ariel frowned, her sharp red eyes scanning the surroundings for any clue. After a moment, she whispered, "I do not see any secret passage." But then, as if catching something imperceptible, she suddenly rushed forward. Channeling her holy sight, she focused her senses on the ground and quickly picked up faint traces of residual magic. "It is weak," she muttered, "but there are remnants of a short-distance teleportation spell here." Gray's expression tensed. "You mean? It is a space that can only be accessed through teleportation." Ariel shook her head slightly, her tone calm yet serious. "Judging from the residual traces, the teleportation distance is about 300 meters below ground. Something's definitely there." 300 meters underground, Gray asked, stepping closer, his eyes gleaming with urgency. Can we reach it? The professor smirked faintly, brushing a strand of red hair from her face. I can create a teleportation gate of my own. Let us give it a try. She raised her hand and snapped her fingers again. A circle of glowing runes appeared beneath them, spreading outward with intricate geometric precision. If there is nothing down there, she explained, the gate will just connect to solid rock. A pulse of light surged from the circle and moments later, a portal shimmered into existence. As the group stepped through, the sight that greeted them left them speechless. What lay before them was an enormous subterranean city, filled with countless rectangular structures packed tightly together in neat rows. The vastness of the space defied logic. Ariel's voice trembled with astonishment as she took it all in. I can't believe it. There is an entire world hidden beneath us. On the other side, Bella, guided by her innate talent, suddenly sensed something. She raised her hand and pointed ahead. I can feel an enormous surge of ether spreading everywhere, especially from that direction. Everyone turned their eyes toward where she was pointing. There, in the distance, stood a structure that looked noticeably different from the rest, larger, darker, and exuding an ominous stillness. The beautiful red-haired professor narrowed her eyes, activating her holy sight once more to scrutinize it. Within moments, her expression hardened. It is not just ether, she murmured, her voice carrying a tense edge. There is another kind of energy leaking out from that place, something completely unlike magic. And it is stronger than anything I have ever encountered. At those words, Gray's eyes widened slightly, as if he too had begun to piece something together. Before he could even finish voicing his thought, Ariel nodded grimly. You are right, she said. That is the power of the purifier. Without wasting a single moment, the three of them hurried toward the mysterious building, the one radiating that overwhelming energy. As they stepped inside, they were immediately greeted by the sight of several towering glass pillars glowing faintly purple, and a massive black door marked with a six-pointed insignia above it. To protect her two students from potential danger, Professor Ariel took the lead. Let us see. The energy source is definitely coming from here. But for now, there is no trace of the purifier. She spoke calmly while tapping her fingers lightly against the door's surface, as if testing it. Behind her, Bella spoke up nervously. Are you sure it is a good idea to touch that thing? Her tone carried an edge of unease, but Ariel remained composed. Relax. This door does not contain any real power. It is only a ceremonial symbol, a part of the ritual. You know that, do not you? She stepped past the doorway and pulled it open effortlessly, adding, see, perfectly safe. Then, glancing around the room, she continued, the power is not in the door itself, it is in the magic array surrounding it. As she said this, Ariel's sharp eyes moved toward the massive glass cylinders filled with a pink, shimmering liquid. Then, almost as if triggered by their presence, those very cylinders suddenly began to vibrate violently, erupting with a surge of energy that made the entire room tremble. Gray's eyes went wide in alarm as he shouted, what the hell is happening? Do not tell me this thing is really summoning the purifier. Standing beside him, Bella grimaced, struggling to withstand the pressure. The magical force is too unstable. We have to shut it down now, she cried. Yet Ariel remained eerily calm, her voice steady amid the chaos. Do not interfere. From what I can tell, this system is not powerful enough to summon the purifier. But before they could react, the space before the black door began to fracture. Countless cracks spread across the air itself, converging into a gaping void of absolute darkness. Gray and Bella were frozen in terror, their voices trembling as they screamed, the space it is tearing apart. At the same moment, the intricate magic circle etched beneath their feet reached its peak output, pulsing with immense energy. Yet, after a few tense seconds, nothing emerged. Both Gray and Bella exchanged bewildered glances, such an enormous surge of power, yet no entity had appeared. Ariel, however, understood immediately. With a calm, analytical tone, she explained, these devices are not meant to summon the purifier. They only pierce a tiny breach connecting to where it resides, draining the energy that leaks from its realm. The core that stabilizes this extraction is most likely fueled by human life itself. From what I can sense, about 10 souls have already been consumed as catalysts. And during the formation process, many more lives were probably sacrificed. My guess is that most of the captives above ground were used as the raw material for this mechanism. Her voice was grave, but her composure never wavered. The truth she revealed, however, made both Gray and Bella's blood run cold. But that revelation only deepened Bella's confusion. Why would they go that far just to harvest energy? What exactly are they planning to do with it? She asked, her brow furrowed. Ariel merely shrugged, answering matter-of-factly, is not it obvious? The flame variant used during the battle, the one amplified by that crystal is what this entire process was designed to produce. And it is not just limited to fire-based attributes. If they manage to mass-produce these catalysts, who knows what kind of destruction they could unleash? As she spoke, Ariel's eyes lifted toward a floating rhomboid-shaped object suspended high in the air, its surface pulsing faintly with energy. Meanwhile, the spatial rift they had seen earlier began to close, its fractures sealing until nothing remained but the empty air. Gray, noticing the change, murmured, "The cracks are fading." So Varian never intended to summon the purifier. While kneeling beside one of the containment tanks to inspect it, Ariel responded, "I am not sure if it is because he did not want to or because he could not, but it seems the spatial conduits here were already running at their limit. This might have been the extent of their capacity." During that time, Bella took a moment to study the chamber, her eyes gleaming with intrigue. "These devices are incredible," she said in awe. "I have never seen spatial magic this precise or powerful." Her assessment earned an approving nod from Ariel. "You are right. To build something like this would require the budget of an entire nation. Yet here, we are looking at 8 complete systems. Only one organization comes to mind that could possibly fund and design something on this scale." Upon hearing that, Bella instinctively blurted out, "The Disgar Empire, right?" But the red-haired professor shook her head decisively. "No, not them. They may be the largest empire in the world, but their magical research is not nearly advanced enough to create something of this level." That answer only fueled Bella's curiosity. "Then who could it be?" she pressed. Ariel did not reply immediately. Her tone grew lower, more deliberate. "It would have to be an organization whose research capabilities surpass even the Empire's." Before she could finish, Gray suddenly cut in, his voice firm with realization. "The World Alliance Academy, right?" A small smile tugged at Ariel's lips as she nodded. "Exactly. No other research institution could possibly handle something of this magnitude, neither in scale nor in funding." After those words, the atmosphere in the room suddenly fell silent. It took several seconds before Bella finally spoke up. "So, you are saying the Academy is behind this place, but the World Union Academy is supposed to protect humanity from threats?" Her voice carried both disbelief and confusion. Seeing her students' naive faith, the beautiful professor merely shook her head. "It is understandable that you do not want to believe it, but no other organization in the world has the resources or authority to pull something like this off." The protagonist frowned, his expression tightening with concern. "But that does not mean the entire academy is our enemy, right? Most of them are still people who stand for justice." As he said this, he recalled the memories of his past life and tried to reassure himself. At the very least, before the regression happened, the Academy's volunteer forces were the ones on the front lines fighting even more desperately than the purging squad. They continued to protect civilians until the bitter end. After seeing that future with my own eyes, I can't bring myself to believe that the Academy would ever turn against humanity. Fortunately, the professor did not disappoint him. "You are right," Ariel replied calmly. "The majority within the Academy are still fighting for humanity. They would never approve of experiments that sacrifice human lives. However, the Academy is vast, it is filled with countless research divisions and hidden facilities. Very few people truly understand the full picture. Whoever is backing Varian has enormous power. With his level of authority alone, he could not possibly have organized all this." As she said that, Bella's expression grew tense. For the first time, she began to realize just how grave the situation was. "Then, does that mean we can't completely trust the Academy either?" she asked quietly. Ariel's gaze hardened as she replied, her tone calm but heavy with bitter truth. "I have watched the Academy from the inside for decades. It is not an institution you can trust blindly, far from it. Most people there genuinely believe they are doing what is best for humanity. Even the ones behind these experiments have probably convinced themselves that their actions serve some greater good. But the truth..." She paused, her eyes dimming slightly. is buried deep in the shadows. Turning back to the matter at hand, Gray spoke up decisively. Do you have any way to track down the mastermind? In response, Ariel immediately activated her holy sight, her eyes glowing faintly as she scanned the surroundings. Let us see. There are no communication devices in this facility, and even the magical traces of the craftsmen have been completely erased from the machinery. The concealment work is so thorough that finding any residual energy signature is almost impossible. As she spoke, Ariel's gaze shifted toward one side of the room. Then, without warning, boom, a deafening explosion erupted behind her. A chain of detonations followed, shaking the entire structure as flames burst out from every corridor. It was as if the entire research facility had triggered a self-destruct sequence. Gray froze in shock, his heart pounding. But amid the chaos, Ariel simply observed the destruction with surprising composure. It looks like they installed an automatic trace erasure system. Interesting. But if that is the case, why did not it activate the moment Varian died? Do not tell me they waited for intruders to trigger it on purpose. Before the professor could speculate any further, Bella shouted urgently, "This is not the time for theories, we have to get out of here now." Seeing her student's panicked face, Ariel only smiled faintly. Calm down. It is just magical explosions. Professors of the World Union Academy are not so fragile that we would die from something like this. She spoke with serene confidence, the glow of power already forming around her as if the raging flames themselves were nothing worth fearing. Ariel immediately activated a protective spell circle to keep the room from collapsing entirely. She warned the others not to step outside the formation. The energy pillars were still blazing with fierce light, and the entire chamber had been shattered beyond recognition. From overhead, chunks of the ceiling began breaking apart and crashing down. Outside, everything had fallen into a desolate silence. Then, in an instant, Ariel's teleportation field pulled the entire group out to safety. After checking everyone one by one, she exhaled and said, "It looks like all the captives have been secured." Bella released a long, shaky sigh. "I really thought we were dead this time." Gray, still tense, added, "Was not that way too dangerous?" Professor Ariel answered calmly, "The amount of cargo was more than I expected, so the teleportation spell was slightly delayed. But it was worth it because we managed to retrieve these." She pointed toward the towering energy pillars. Once these were brought back to the academy, there was no way the administration would be able to ignore them anymore. Under the bright full moon, the sky gleamed quietly through the night. By the next morning, at the World Alliance Academy, inside the headmaster's office, the headmaster announced that the survivors were being treated in the academy's medical wing. Orodrome commended Gray and the others, expressing sincere gratitude for stopping Varian's illegal research. Lifting a report into his hands, he continued, "Now then. Regarding the magical engines he possessed. Each one of them is worth more than the treasury of an entire nation." Ariel's expression tightened. "Exactly. And there were 8 of them. There is no way Varian could have gathered that kind of firepower alone. Where did he even get them?" The headmaster responded curtly, "They were stolen." He looked at them and explained, "The shipment was intercepted en route. All 78 transport agents were wiped out." Bella and Gray stiffened in horror. Ariel, her voice sharp, pressed further, 78 transport agents from the academy. All dead, do not tell me. That incident from 15 years ago. The headmaster nodded. Yes. The cargo stolen back then was these very engines. Ariel lowered her voice. If I remember correctly, the ones responsible were blood feeders, the headmaster answered immediately. I am sure you have all heard the name. Gray and Bella certainly had. The largest criminal syndicate in the world. Those parasites of humanity, Bella muttered, hatred tightening her jaw. No matter how many times they are wiped out, they crawl back out from the shadows. Gray glanced at her. She was trembling with anger. They are also the ones who murdered my parents, she said through clenched teeth. Orodrome spoke in a deep, somber tone. Yes. Even if they are eradicated 100 times, they always return. No one knows where they hide or who leads them. They say more than 70% of crime-related deaths worldwide are because of them. And honestly, it would not surprise me if some of their members have already infiltrated this academy. The worst part is, there is no real way to identify them. And even if we could, the academy would not act. That last part made Gray erupt. What, even if there are criminals inside the academy? Ariel stopped him. That is simply how the academy operates now. Anyone with talent is given a chance to grow stronger regardless of lineage, race, gender. The headmaster confirmed, exactly. Even whether they are criminals or not does not matter. Bella found the policy absurd. But if criminals are here, should not we punish them? The headmaster sighed helplessly. I agree. But the higher-ups do not share that opinion. Bella frowned in disbelief. Are not you the headmaster? Orodrome gave a bitter smile. I am just a figurehead. He slammed the report on his desk. I may be the face of the academy in name, but my actual authority means next to nothing. You want to know who truly runs this academy? Bella and Gray went silent, then nodded firmly. The headmaster simply chuckled. Then become stronger. The stronger you prove yourselves, the deeper into the academy you will be allowed to go. And the deeper you go, the more secrets you will uncover. He continued, I can't give you his name, but you have a senior and upperclassman whose influence is strong enough to dictate the academy's entire direction. Even that insane policy allowing criminals to enroll was decided by him. Gray hesitated, then asked, so, if we surpass him? Exactly, the headmaster answered. If you become stronger than he is, you might actually be able to change this academy. He stared straight at them. In this place, strength was everything. Both Gray and Bella tightened their fists. Orodrome watched them and thought to himself, interesting. Very interesting. Ariel had no chance of defeating Varian. Which meant that one of those two must have pulled it off. Ariel's divine eyes were still as sharp as ever. He could not wait to see what kind of monster she intended to create this time. By now, Gray had already left the headmaster's office. He looked down at the traces of the curse still lingering on his hand and muttered under his breath, so. The academy's administrative authority, huh? If I want to bring down the purifier or uncover the puppet master pulling the strings, then I had to get stronger first. Just then, someone brushed past him hard enough to make him stagger. Gray flinched and immediately apologized, sorry. But a split second later, a vicious kick shot toward him without warning. The blow landed cleanly, sending him skidding backward. Gray managed to stay on his feet, but the impact was no joke. Seeing that, the troublemaker let out a surprised grunt. Tougher than I expected. Gray, still polite despite the blow, asked, is there a problem? Problem? The man snarled through clenched teeth. Then he exploded, shouting, you walk around like this place belongs to you. And a special admission reject like you thinks he deserves to be in this hallway. Gray understood immediately another one who hated the special admissions candidates. But this was the first time someone had dared to actually kick him in the middle of the hall. His hand tightened around the sword at his hip. So you want to fight? He asked calmly. The man paused for a moment, then replied, I would be more than willing. But it looks like the second reject just arrived. Behind Gray, Professor Ariel was approaching. TCH. I am leaving, the man muttered. As he walked past, he continued cursing under his breath. Sorry, surveillance here's too strict. I can't get any closer. He bit down on his finger hard enough to draw blood. But I will send someone else soon, he whispered. Deeply's voice echoed with certainty, Varian. On this side, a professor approached and asked, what happened? Gray greeted first. Professor Ariel. Then he explained, some student just kicked me. They said someone like me, a specially admitted clairvoyant, should not be wandering the academy hallways. She observed the situation for a moment before responding, no weapons, no injuries. That means I do not really have any reason to intervene. Ariel then looked at him and asked, then why did not you chase after them and give them a punch to teach them a lesson? Gray was astonished. Wait, I am allowed to do that. She put on an indifferent air. Technically, as a professor, I can't give permission. But lately, my eyesight's been poor. If something happened nearby, I might not even see it. Gray shrugged it off. Too suspicious anyway. Better not cause more trouble. Ariel, however, did not seem entirely satisfied. What a shame. Really? Then she asked curiously, Tell me something her specially admitted clairvoyance really hated that much. Gray lightly covered his arm. People often ridicule us, but this is the first time someone actually laid hands on me. Ariel asked again, so they actually mocked you? She looked helpless. I am sorry. If only I had a bit more authority. Seeing this, Gray reassured her, please do not worry. Without you, I would not even have been able to step foot in this academy. Besides, Bella and the others will prove that the clairvoyant program is not a mistake. Anyway, your eyes are very sharp, Professor. Ariel was quiet for a moment, feeling a little lighter. Thank you. Then she pointed directly at Gray. But do not think this is someone else's responsibility. Among all the clairvoyant students, I expect the most from you. She listed a few names: Amy White, Leek Muller, Jacob Bloomfield, students who had been specially admitted before. All of them became top talents, but she admitted this was the first time she truly believed someone could surpass human limits when she met Gray. Faced with the professor's expectations, Gray thought to himself, compared to them, this won't be easy. He also had another concern. No, thinking like that is weakness. The ones behind Varian have not given up on summoning the Purger yet. Even they could not deal with it. I came back to this timeline to make sure I can defeat it. The fate of this world rests in my hands. Meanwhile, at the World Alliance Academy's duel arena, a professor was explaining, today's swordsmanship class will be a live combat session. Pair up according to the list on the board. Gray thought to himself, live combat, huh? I will have to focus completely. If I make a mistake, people will start criticizing the clairvoyant students again. At the very least, I need to prove I am not inferior to regular students. Then he noticed something alarming. Oh no. On the pairing board, it read, Gray Lee, Leonhard Appias. Gray thought, Leonhard Appias, the top-ranked swordsmanship student, the strongest in the first year already. The professor addressed the students, I have paired students with similar skill levels. Fight freely and treat this as a real battle. Gray's inner protest was fierce. Similar skill levels, my foot. Why am I paired with the top student when I am a special admit? He tallied it up in his head. And he hates clairvoyant students, too. He is probably eager to beat me up after the last incident. Then Gray noticed movement behind him. Not even started, and Cao Cao is already here. Oh no. Leon said cheerfully, looks like we have been paired up, I am really excited about this. Gray's thoughts were restrained but sharp. Facing Gray, the top of the class. It is an honor, truly. Leon's excitement was palpable. I have trained harder than anyone. Gray, now you will see my true swordsmanship. Gray's apprehension deepened with every passing moment. That dazzling smile. There was no doubt now. He was exhilarated, thrilled to finally have a legitimate chance to strike him. Leon even added, this is going to be so much fun. On the arena floor, the supervising teacher called out, is everyone ready? At the command, begin, the students immediately paired off and started dueling. Leon charged forward with his sword. Here I come. Luckily, Gray successfully blocked the attack. Leon swung his blade forcefully, sending Gray stumbling backward. But Leon seized the moment and lunged again. He thrust sharply forward, but Gray managed to dodge just in time. Not willing to fall behind, Gray countered with a swing of his own. The two swords clashed with a resounding impact. Leon, impressed, said to Gray, you are strong. It is unbelievable that someone like you did not enter through the standard route. Blades flashed like lightning, slicing through the air as both combatants exchanged strikes. They were evenly matched, each parrying and striking with precise, relentless skill. Gray thought to himself, I thought I would be defeated immediately. But I can hold my ground. Still, no matter how hard I push, I can't match his raw strength. He carefully studied Leon. The other's swordsmanship was extraordinary at textbook-perfect style. Every move was precise, flawless, and terrifying in its perfection. Even with experience from a past life and training under his master, Gray recognized the threat. Suddenly, Leon paused to gather momentum. He poured all his strength into the next strike, and even though he would only lived one life, he moved like a monster. Before everyone's eyes, Leon and Gray clashed in a blur of steel, their movements so fast they were almost invisible. The spectators were awestruck. He really is on par with Leonhardt. Leon grinned broadly. This is amazing, I could fight like this all day. Gray, however, was exhausted. I have nothing left. If not for Master Heathcote's training, I would already be down. He glanced at Leon. How is he not even breathing hard yet? Anxiety gnawed at him. I am about to collapse. I have to end this now. The professor had said to fight as if it were real, as a true battle. Gray's eyes sharpened. Ahead of him, Leon readied his next swing. He brought his sword down with full force, but Gray ducked, narrowly avoiding it. Gray planted his hand firmly on the ground, channeling his strength. Leon's eyes widened in shock. What? Gray had slammed his lower body upward, kicking Leon squarely in the leg.